I think they're going to be talking about that in a little while. The ANC election manifesto finally being released on Saturday. And a few things that were really interesting about it. And we've made the point, Moses Mabhida really very busy at the moment. It was full for the ANC's election manifesto conference. Some of the big promises: a promise to create 2.5 million jobs or employment opportunities in 5 years, to reduce crime, to grow the economy, to use expropriation legislation around land. Also a promise of a national youth service in conjunction with the South African National Defence Force. And this youth service idea has been around for a long time. I think a long time. I just don't know if it's ever actually going to happen. Poor SANDF at the moment doesn't have money to do what it needs to do, and there's another story around that, around the DRC. But the fact is that there are big promises coming from the ANC at the moment to fix potholes, for example. One of the big issues I think is going to come into the elections, and you tell me, because I'd be very interested if you agree or not, you may well strongly disagree, is that the ANC talking about its leadership and talking about the people that it's going to use to lead the party, to represent the party in Parliament, the National Assembly, provincial legislatures, etc. And the president saying that these people will be people who can pass through the eye of the needle. That's the sort of ANC phrase. I know it comes from the Bible. But also talking about a sort of credible leadership. And this really gets to what's going to happen to the people implicated during the state capture years, during the Zonda Commission. Those people, are they going to represent the party or not? And there's been a huge fuss about this, and I think this may turn into a big election issue. We'll see what happens. He also said, this is President Cyril Ramaphosa, leader of the ANC now, he said that the people who are making troublemakers have left the ANC, and I think we all know who he's referring to. You don't? Okay, I'll give you a hint. Former leader of the... Yeah, okay, thought you might be there now. All right, so anyway, I think he's referring to former President Jacob Zuma, who also had rallies over the last few days representing the Umkhonto weSizwe party. Big promises from the ANC over the weekend. Very interesting to see how it all pans out. You'll hear from the ANC themselves, hear some analysis on it in about an hour from now as well. And then, of course, that horrible story, 9 people who were at the event dying in a bus crash yesterday. And just very sad to hear that people go, expecting to have a big political event, see their friends, see their family, see their comrades, and then unfortunately passing away on the way home. And we've seen this happen before with political events, unfortunately. There's a big story in Klopper Park in the East Rand, where a man took his wife, his children, and a family friend hostage. And then it seems he shot 3 police officers who responded to the scene. Quite a serious issue. He has now been arrested, has been charged, etc. But quite a serious situation. Can you imagine being around that, having that happen in your neighborhood? Very scary when this happens. And the police, of course, have to take this incredibly seriously. And it is, as always, like something out of a movie, but very difficult to actually, do much about. Very tricky. In the end, it seems that it did resolve itself and ended peacefully. So I'm glad to hear that. But 3 police officers shot. Presumably, I hope they're okay. And we'll sort of follow that story and keep an eye on it. Still big arguments I see around the copyright bill. This has been going on forever. Forever. And essentially, authors say if you have too many copyright exemptions, it means that people can just copy our work. And then other people say, look, we need an exemption, for example, to turn books from the printed word to convert them into Braille. And our laws don't allow that to happen easily enough. There's a big fight about it, but that bill still going on. And then I mentioned the SANDF and money. Business Day is a big story around the DRC and the DRC deployment. Where is that money going to come from? It'll cost 1.2 billion rand in the first year, and then go up a bit to 2.3 billion rand. That's what the SANDF says. And there's still no clarity on where the money is going to come from. And the budget wasn't specifically allocated in the budget. The SANDF can't afford it, we know that. In real terms, their budget actually declines very slightly over the next financial year. And I know we've had this conversation before. Do you increase social grants or do you increase money for the SANDF? How do you do it? And at the same time, if you're going to use the SANDF in places like the DRC, you are going to have to pay for it. And that gets us to an interesting question. You might have seen this story over the weekend. I was fascinated by the story. I think there are lots of issues in our society that are raised by this issue. It concerns the actions of a judge, Judge Mandla Nkosi Morta, and he was hearing a case involving a private sector company, I think it's called Paraform Scaffolding or something like that, and the Broad-Based Black Economic Commission. And he realized that all of the lawyers in front of him, so all four of the advocates in front of him, each side had two advocates, all four of them were white. And he said he's not happy with this. He said that he wants these lawyers to explain to him how it is that all four of them came to be white. And it's a really interesting issue because we've had again and again and again government being accused of using only only white advocates and only white lawyers. And in some cases we've seen really high profile, prominent political figures, black political figures, using white advocates. It's very controversial in some ways, and I can understand why. I think there's a lot that's going on here. So he said that he wants to know, and he asked for a hearing. He asked them to explain why it is that all of these lawyers were white. This is what the judge said. In the end, he said, it's okay, you don't have to actually address me on it. You can give me a sort of written argument. And there's going to be a huge ruckus in the legal sorority around this. And let me just explain why, as I understand it, and I'm not a lawyer, as you know, but I think when a judge has to resolve a dispute between two people, so when there's a court case, the judge can only deal with the issues that are brought before them. They can't introduce other issues into the case. That's my understanding. And so I suppose critics of Judge Morta are going to say you shouldn't have done this. And it reminded me a little bit. Do you remember Sir Lewis Hamilton, when he stood up on the podium at the end of a Formula One race and he wore a Black Lives Matter t-shirt? Do you remember that? A long time ago. It was 2020. There was a lot going on. But he wore a Black Lives Matter t-shirt. Now, you're not allowed to make a political statement on that podium. Black Lives Matter t-shirt, to me, must be a political statement. You're calling for change to the way society happens. So he broke the rules. But no one did anything. And I've always thought no one did anything, because in that moment, what he did, it seemed to me, was morally correct. So no one was going to say, you broke the rules, because what he was doing was right. I wonder if the judge, maybe there's a sort of resonance here around that. Maybe he's breaking the rules, but is what he's doing morally right? And does that sort of allow or absolve in this case? Anyway, we'll get a view as we go through the show, but I wonder what your view is. Did he do the right thing, Judge Mandla Nkosi Morta, when he said, look, this is not right, that you have only come to me with white lawyers? And it's a case that involves the Broad-Based Black Economic Empowerment Commission. It's sort of astonishing in a way, your view on that. And then I must just mention the peanut butter story. It's called aflatoxin, which is this thing that gets into this sort of naturally occurring mold, but it's harmful. You mustn't have it. And there's been a recall of some of the peanut butter brands. And I see Woolworths now, the peanut butter dairy ice cream has been recalled. So if you've got some peanut butter dairy ice cream in your freezer, you want to go and take it back, and they'll give you a refund. If they don't give you a refund, let us know, by the way, please. But still issues around peanut butter at the moment. So just check that out if you need to. You know how to get in touch, 086 000 2032, SMS 41391, tweet us FM Radio, and that's Stephen Grootes. Send your WhatsApp voice notes to 0614 104 107. Good morning. It's just after 6:15.
The Daily News Diary on SAFM.
Madupi Makhalamele, good morning. Welcome back.
Thank you very much, Stephen. A very good morning to you.
How are you doing?
Can't complain, my brother. Yourself?
Yeah, all right. As always, busy. Lots going on. I see the IEC has a big briefing today.
Yes, of course. That is one story that we'll be looking at. They'll brief the media on the state of readiness after the proclamation of the election date. They'll also use the briefing, as we understand, to communicate their timetable towards the holding of the polls. That's one story. Another story that we're going to be following up on is investigations into yesterday's bus crash with ANC members from Mpumalanga that killed at least 9 people. They were traveling back from the party's election manifesto in KZN that took place on Saturday. And another one also, Stephen, that we'll be looking at is the rape trial of the founder of the Rivers of Living Waters Church, Bishop Stephen Zondo. His rape trial resumes today in the Pretoria High Court. Now, he's appearing on multiple charges of rapes, indecent assault, and also defeating the ends of justice. That's just a taste, Stephen.
I mean, that story is horrific because some of the people are very young. Some of them are adults now, and this issues really shaped their lives.
Absolutely, yeah.
Madupi Makhalamele, thank you. We'll be listening on the radio this morning. You're with SFM, 18 minutes after 6.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
So have a look at your weather around the country this morning. Tshwane, fine in the morning, becoming partly cloudy. Scattered showers, thunder showers in the afternoon, a low of 18, a high of 33. Johannesburg, fine this morning, partly cloudy. Scattered showers and thunder showers from the afternoon, 17 and 30. Vereeniging, fine this morning, partly cloudy. Isolated showers, thunder showers in the afternoon, 16 and 31. Bombela, cloudy. Isolated showers and rain, 19 and 22. Polokwane, partly cloudy. Isolated showers, thunder showers from the afternoon, 22 and 28. Mahikeng, fine, becoming partly cloudy. Isolated thunder showers in the afternoon, 19 and 35. Vryburg, fine, 15 and 35. Mangung, fine, 13 and 30. Kimberley, fine, 14 and 32. Uppington, fine, 16 and 34. Cape Town, fine, a fresh to strong southerly wind, 17 and 27. George, partly cloudy, a moderate easterly wind, 13 and 23. Gqeberha, cloudy, isolated showers, rain in the morning, otherwise partly cloudy, a light southerly wind, 14 and 23. East London, cloudy, isolated showers and rain, a moderate southwesterly wind, 15 and 24. eThekwini, cloudy, scattered showers and rain, a moderate to fresh southeasterly, 18 and 24. Richards Bay, cloudy, scattered showers and rain, a moderate to fresh southerly wind, 19 and 25. And Pietermaritzburg, cloudy, isolated showers and rain, 13 and 19.
Eskom understands that electricity is an integral part of running a business. However, electricity demand is currently higher than supply, and energy efficiency is critical. Businesses are encouraged to reduce consumption between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. by not leaving electrical equipment on standby mode, as well as turning off unnecessary lighting. We can reduce load shedding by working together. Every kilowatt counts.
Nottingham Forest are navigating a path to the top half of the table.
Has to be a goal from Hudson. Yes! There we go! Get in there! Wrap it up against West Ham United.
While Liverpool focus on a massive strategy to be on the summit until the end of the season.
Oh! That's outstanding! Liverpool have turned the game on its head. McAllister's thunderous cross.
Experience the Premier League contest between Nottingham Forest FC and Liverpool FC on Saturday 2 March at 4:30 p.m. live on SABC3. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Brought to you by SABC Sport. For the love of the game.
Get South Africa's best adventure SUV. The new Ford Everest Sport 2-liter auto bi-turbo 4x2, now from only $14,499 per month with no deposit. With 20-inch alloy wheels and black exterior accents. Get the new Ford Everest Sport at your nearest Ford dealer today. T&Cs apply.
Worldview Update, bringing you closer to international or global news.
21 after 6, good morning. The US President Joe Biden has now announced a new list of sanctions to be imposed on Russia and on individuals in Russia, the US says, are involved in the war in Ukraine and were involved in the death of the opposition leader, Alexei Navalny. The US and the EU and other countries imposed sanctions on Russia 2 years ago after it first launched its invasion of Ukraine. There's plenty of reports that the Russian economy is not suffering as a result of this. It has also been able to get revenue through oil sales, for example. Gustavo de Cavallo is a senior researcher at the South African Institute of International Affairs. Gustavo, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen.
When Biden says these are crushing sanctions, are they really going to have an impact on Russia?
Look, I think at this particular stage, the sanctions are more symbolic than they are in terms of providing a direct impact, a further impact in the Russian economy. Russia is already the most sanctioned country in the world. As you mentioned, we've seen the current system of sanctions that have been presented to Russia have not had the expected impact, particularly because the West is in a catch-22 situation. On the one hand, they want to cripple the Russian economy so it contains their efforts of wars, but they also know they cannot stop entirely the trade of oil and gas that would create a global impact in terms of inflation and direct impact on the economy of Western countries and the rest of the global economy as well. But I think to a certain extent, it was an expected process, perhaps a bit more symbolic than it is in terms of the particular impact, and interesting for me to see what will be the impact in terms of the sanctions of the Russian system of payment, MIR, that to a certain degree it is a very important aspect that the Russians have been trying to circumvent in the last 2 years in terms of being able to pay and receive to its own international trade.
Is this in a way Biden appearing to, he sort of has to appear to do something? He can't allow Nelvane to pass away and have do nothing. He can't get the Republicans to pass what he needs them to pass in Congress and the Senate. So now he's going to do this. He has to be seen to do this.
Precisely. Biden is in a particularly difficult situation at the moment. Ukraine hasn't been seeing much gains on the ground for the last year and a half. We've seen very divided U.S. Congress at the moment in terms of its own ability of providing financial and direct support to the Ukrainians. But also all of the eyes now are looking towards the elections, towards the end of the year, and the possibility of Donald Trump winning. And many of us expect that if Donald Trump wins, there may be quite a different strategy that the Americans will be engaging with in terms of containing Russia. So the symbolism of the sanctions are still important. I don't think we should completely discard the measures that were taken, and that will have some increased complications and difficulties for Russia to engage internationally, but it certainly won't be a game changer in terms of changing the tides and changing the terrain towards Ukrainian victory.
Is there going to be any reaction from Russia to this? I mean, are they just going to say whatever to the United States?
Well, to a certain extent, when you already have been subject for over 4,000 sanctions to date, being by far the most sanctioned country in the world, the new 500 sanctions that have been imposed won't make really a major difference. And I don't see really how the Russians would really have a stronger reaction than what they have so far.
It looks, if you look at the sort of grinding attrition in Ukraine, the Western alliance against Russia appears to be faltering sort of in a way, obviously because partly based on what's happening in the US. And if we see this as a contest, not so much between Ukraine and Russia, but between the West and Russia, is Russia winning?
Well, it's a difficult question, but I think what we do see at this stage is that that idea that unity of views and positions that conflicts often bring in terms of what they're looking to do has been cracking for the last year in particular. The Russians have not lost a lot of terrain in Ukraine in the last year and a half. Effectively, they just got a very important strategic site in Advika in the last couple of weeks. So it will be important for us to reassess this towards the middle of the year when summer comes, and we expect the conflicts will intensify because of the changes in the weather in the terrain. But at the moment, what we're seeing is really a process of stagnation and attrition, which seems to be much more important for Russia in terms of pushing for negotiations and ending the conflict. It's an interesting factor that the Russians are particularly interested in engaging in negotiations at the moment, as they expect that at this particular stage they would still be able to gain some territory as part of that.
Gustavo de Cavallo, thanks very much indeed. Senior Researcher at the South African Institute of International Affairs. Really appreciate the time. 27 minutes now, after 6 o'clock.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning.
Good morning.
You know, I shouldn't say this, but I laughed at Khan. I mean, really, Chiefs.
I know. What a bad day at the office. Dumped out of the Nedbank Cup last 32. 5-4 on penalties was the score by the amateur team Milford FC last night. Now the KwaZulu-Natal side, who compete in the third tier ABC Motsepe League, fought for every challenge, absorbing the pressure. Chiefs piled on in their defense and rode plenty of luck to take the game to 0-0 after extra time. Let's listen now to the Chiefs interim coach, Kevin Johnson.
Yeah, not a good day at the office for Kaizer Chiefs. I thought we had probably 89% possession of the game. Played against a team that sat back the whole game. And from the first whistle, I thought the whole game we had definitely 4 clear chances beside the other 15 that could have gone in. But the 4 was very, very clear. And we also gone and missed a penalty.
Meanwhile, Chippa United had to dig deep for their 2-1 victory over NC Professionals in the Nedbank Cup last 32 match that took place at the Mgolisi Dickie Jacobs Stadium in Uppington. The hard-fought victory saw the Chile boys progress to the round of 16. The Eastern Cape side looking to make 2 wins in a row when they take on Stellenbosch FC in their DStv Premiership game on the 1st of March. Elsewhere, Liverpool won the League Cup in dramatic fashion as Virgil van Dijk's header late in extra time sealed a 1-0 win against Chelsea at Wembley yesterday. It was Liverpool's first trophy following Jurgen Klopp's bombshell announcement he will step down at the end of this season. The German will hope Liverpool's first silverware since the 2022 FA Cup will be on the springboard of an incredible farewell tour. Here's Jurgen Klopp.
This, what we see here today, is so exceptional. We might never see again, and not because I'm on the sideline, because these things don't happen in football. I got taught outside that there's an English phrase: you don't win trophies with kids. I didn't know that. Right in you. It is in my longer careers than mine, but in my more than 20 years, easily the most special trophy I ever won.
In the meantime, Sheffield United teammates Jack Robinson and Vinicius Sosa, they clashed on the pitch as the Premier League's bottom club lost 1-0 at Wolves. In rugby news, Italy clawed back from a 7-point first-half deficit to draw with 14-man France in yesterday's Six Nations clash that took place in Lille. And finally, boxing news, super middleweight contender Edgar Berlanga is targeting a fight with Saul Canelo Alvarez after a 6th-round knockout win over Padraig McRory. The Americans send the Belfast man McRory to the canvas with a right overhand punch with 25 seconds left of the 6th round, and it took place in Orlando, Florida. That's a wrap of your sport on Sunrise. We'll bring you more headlines, top of the hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning, you with SFM. Leading the conversation, we'll talk about this judge's comments around race in a few moments. Stage 2 now, Stage 3 later, 6:30.
A very good morning with the news headlines. The ANC in Mpumalanga has sent its condolences to the families of their members who were killed in a bus crash on the R33 road between Vryheid and Paul Petersburg in KZN. One of the 3 men accused of robbing people who went hiking at nature resorts in Marikana in the northwest will appear before the Brits Magistrates Court today, and the Afghanistan Journalist Center, the AFJC, says the Taliban authorities in the southeastern Ghost province have banned girls from making phone calls to radio stations and to TV stations. I'll be back with all the details at the top of the hour.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Very good morning. There's protesting in the Eastern Cape area. The N2 between Dutwa and Butterworth is currently obstructed with community protest and burning tyres. East London, one of the in the CBD, so if you're coming in on Fleet Street, one of the crossing streets, you'll see some burning tyres there as well. Really sort of downtown East London area. So a little bit of unrest in that region as well. Joburg, the N12 in from Protea Glen and Lenasia queuing in towards the Golden Highway exit at Eldorado Park area. Esky and Patheli into Pretoria looks very heavy. It's one of those mornings where you sit already from Van der Hof coming through into Marabastad and then deep down to the CBD. It looks like the problem there around WF and Como. Leaving Durban, a truck fire incident to watch out for between Pavilion and Paradise Valley. That, of course, is in the construction zone as well. And Cape Town, just having a look at the N1, it looks really busy this month. There's plenty of traffic en route between Brackenfell and the M5 Kuburg interchange. That's a different traffic pattern. It's an extended queue. Normally you sort of queue to Sable Road, but it's gone past that down towards Kuburg interchange, and it's very heavy this morning. There's lots of traffic on that N1. The N2, not much better either, coming in from the airport to Hospital Bend. And no traffic lights coming out of the third. Mitchell's Plain at probably one of the busiest junctions around Cape Town at this time of morning. R300 and M7. Jack Scobell Drive, no lights. Both of those routes jamming out towards the Samora Michelle Philippi side. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray Machlaka, good morning.
Good morning. Hi there.
Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, both markets are mostly down, starting a new trading week on a negative footing. It is a big week on the economic front. Consumer inflation data from the US, Japan, and Europe are expected this week. The data could provide more clarity on the outlook for global interest rates, and investors this morning are cautious ahead of the inflation data releases. So in Asian markets, Hong Kong's Hang Seng is down 0.7%, China's Shanghai Composite is down 0.6%, and Japan's Nikkei is up 0.5%. And before the US market opens later today, the US futures market is down. Nasdaq, Dow Jones, and S&P futures are each down 0.2%. And in the currency market, the dollar to the rand is weaker at 19.32. Concerns around inflation and interest rates in the US are weakening the local currency.
And then private sector credit extension data for January, that'll be out this week.
Yeah, on Thursday, the Reserve Bank will release data showing the take-up of credit or debt in January by businesses and consumers. For most of 2023, the take-up of credit has increased despite interest rates being high. Businesses and consumers might be taking up more debt to be able to cope with the cost of living. Economists at Investec and Nedbank expect the take-up of credit to slow down in January. The economists say consumers and businesses are starting to feel the pain of higher interest rates, and interest rates have increased by 4.7% since November 2021.
And then producer price inflation for January also out this week. Inflation's still a hot topic.
Indeed, on Thursday, Statistics South Africa will release producer price inflation data for January. This data shows the cost or inflation pressures faced by factories in their process of manufacturing goods. Factories tend to face inflation pressures before consumers do. So producer price inflation data for January is important because it will give clues about the direction of inflation in 2024.
Ray McClark, thanks very much. Ray, of course, back in an hour's time. More business news through the day here on SAFM.
Africa Update on SAFM Sunrise, a continental overview of current African affairs.
Russ Advocate Sipho Mantula from the Thabo Mbeki African School of Public and International Affairs at UNISA. Good morning.
Steve, fresh morning and Jumbo Africa to the listeners.
In Windhoek yesterday, that big ceremony, the final funeral for the late President Hey Geingob.
Stephen, this was indeed after almost 20 days of mourning of the former president and the late president of Namibia, Hey Geingob, that yesterday we saw more than 25 heads of states who have attended that funeral yesterday in the Heroes' Ache of Namibia. The former president died at the age of 82, Stephen. We know that he had been in exile for 27 years, spending time in Botswana, Zambia, and the US before returning to Namibia in 1989. The current acting president said that he has left them with an economic roadmap towards growth in Namibia. When you look at his the former first lady, the wife, Monica, saying that you were born a peasant and you have died as a president. Very interesting messages coming from both the wife and the acting president, Mbumba, in Namibia. And as I've said, we saw even President Ramaphosa jetting immediately after the election manifesto of the ANC to Namibia as well to attend that funeral of the late president of Namibia, and also being one of the key people in the formation of SADC, who was playing a key role in the SADC movement and as well as at the AU level.
And then Nigeria, ECOWAS basically, have lifted the economic sanctions on Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea. This is a big move, sure.
Interesting move, Stephen, but the leaders and both the chairperson and the president of ECOWAS Commission, Dr. Omar Tura, and the president of of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu, on Saturday, it was an extraordinary summit in Abuja, Stephen, where they took this decision, and it is based on what you can say is based maybe on not on political will, political pressure, but it's also on a humanitarian pressure. And they are saying that it's also for the what they call democratic good governance. They've pulled out they've lifted sanctions, Stephen, from Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso and Guinea. Interestingly, that we never heard about Guinea. It was all along the three countries, Niger, Mali and Burkina Faso, that were troublemakers in the ECOWAS move after they've pulled out of ECOWAS last month. Interestingly, for Niger, Stephen, their citizens will now have access to electricity. Remember that they were having a challenge after they pulled out of ECOWAS. Nigeria immediately started to pull out their electric grid to Niger, to Niamey. Now we saw Bola Tinubu raising this issue on Saturday, also say that they had to pursue their brothers to say that we are lifting these sanctions, but let us engage on issues that affect the regional community.
In Senegal, there's a big national dialogue today, and opposition leaders won't go.
Stephen, they don't go because remember yesterday actually it will have supposed to be an election day in Senegal, in Dakar. Now your out of 19 presidential candidates, 16 are saying we're not going to that sham national dialogue, which is scheduled to begin today, Stephen, until tomorrow. Remember that was raised by Macky Sall last week in the State of the Nation when he was engaging with the citizens to say that they are aiming between today and tomorrow to have a national dialogue where they will come up with a date for the next coming elections. But the opposition saying that actually you are holding this nation at a hostage by not allowing us to go for the elections as it was planned. So we'll wait and see, Stephen, what will happen between today and tomorrow, since you have opposition rejecting to be part of the national dialogue.
And then in Tunisia, a court sentencing the opposition leader Ben Mbarek to 6 months in prison.
And they are saying it's for conspiracy against the state security. Remember last year, this is a person who was criticizing the parliamentary election of 2022. This being a former president, also the former head of state, Ben Mbarek, criticized Professor President Kais Saied on many issues since 2019. Now, over the weekend, he was given this 6 month sentence, even by the Tunisian courts, and that's where the man was also, his lawyers were criticizing him, saying that he was not given a chance to can defend himself, actually, because it appears that he was just taking a chance, Stephen, by trying to take this matter alone, because this is a serious matter, actually. When you have been charged for conspiring against the state security, is a very serious charge, but I think the sentence was light, considering that he was a former member of parliament and a former head of state.
And then in our archives, this day, 26th of February, 1996.
It's almost 28 years ago, Stephen, when there was a tension between Algeria, Algiers, and Tshwane, South Africa, when the late President Nelson Mandela and the late Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister Aziz Bahad were sent to Algeria to smooth out things, Stephen. And what was the issues? It was around Mandela receiving one of the Algerian opposition of the Islamic Salvation Front, Haddam, into the country. Now, Mandela and as well as Aziz Bahad had to go to Algeria and try to stabilize their diplomatic relations. Asante sana SG, as we are still leading the conversation, SAFM.
Ras Advocate Sipho Mantula, thank you very much indeed. Back, of course, tomorrow, more news from our continent through the day here on SAFM.
Mzansi Africa.
Siyabulela
nangomso.
Thank you for witnessing the Africa Cup of Nations Côte d'Ivoire 2023 in your language of choice on SABC radio stations, digital platforms, and SABC TV channels.
Big ups to McDonald's for being on board.
Your magnificent and heartwarming support gave millions of South Africans a spectacular and exhilarating experience during AFCON.
Asonye.
Proudly brought to you
by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
And we would buy 500 cars, and we would buy 500 more. So sell your car for the best price, and we won't think about it twice. We buy cars, we buy cars. We buy cars, we buy cars.
We Buy Cars, the easiest way to sell your car by far.
SAFM 104 to 107 nationwide.
18 minutes to 7 the time. Good morning. You know the number 086 000 2032. What's in your mind this morning? Lots of different issues. Well, it's now emerged that a judge in the High Court in Tshwane, Judge Mandla Nkosi Mortars, asked two legal teams acting before him in a case to explain why none of them are black or all of them are white. The cases involve a dispute between a private company, it's called Periform Work Scaffolding Engineering, and the other party is the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Commission. Between them, the parties have four advocates. All of them are white. Judge Mortar asked the parties to explain why this was the case in a virtual hearing. He then said he wouldn't demand a hearing, but did request legal papers to be submitted on the issue. This has been a contentious issue for a long time. Government, politicians often accused of using white lawyers, white advocates in the past. Although, as I understand the law, and as you know I'm not a lawyer, a judge is often told they can only resolve the issues before them. In other words, they can't normally introduce other issues. So there are a lot of different things going on here. Chris Mamathuncha is the Secretary General of the Black Lawyers Association. Mr. Mamathuncha, good morning and thank you for your time this morning.
Morning, Stephen. Good morning to you and good morning to your listeners, and thanks for the opportunity.
I've never heard of a judge saying something like this before in a case. Do you support the judge for doing this?
Stephen, again, thank you for the opportunity to share our perspective with your listeners. Yes, we do support the sentiment of the judge 100% as the Black Lawyers Association. There's nothing new that has been said by the judge that we as practitioners and members of the Black Lawyers Association are not aware of. Judges make these remarks anytime in court. I and members of the BLA are not even aware why is this matter now becoming a topical issue.
Does it still happen that government uses white advocates and lawyers and not black advocates?
One of the most disappointing developments in this matter is that the other party involved in this matter is the BE Commission that briefs two white senior counsel. And in total disregard of Section 217 of the Constitution, we would not have expected it to come from a commission of that nature. But moreover than that, the BLA stands for Transformation Civil. It must be known that Judge Mortar represents the sentiments of black lawyers on the ground. You will also recall that when Judge Mortar was interviewed by the JSC, he did not make it a secret that he comes from the BLA. The sentiments that are expressed by Judge Mortar are sentiments of the Black Lawyers Association. And we are very pleased that at a judicial level, you have got a judge who is able to pick the issue of transformation at the level of the judiciary. It's a pleasing development. There is no need to panic. It is the right path that the judge has taken.
I think one of the issues that will come up, and you'll know, Mr. Mamathuncha, that there are people who are going to criticize him. You know, this could well become quite a big issue. And I think what they're going to say is that a judge involved in adjudicating a dispute cannot introduce other issues into the case. And there's sort of rules that judges are supposed to follow. You'll probably know more about that than I do because I'm not a lawyer. But do you think in this case, despite that rule, he had a right to do that here? It was still the morally correct thing. Do you think he broke the rules, or do you think he was doing the right thing anyway?
At the BLA level and at the practice level, we are not aware of the rule that prevents the judge from making such a remark. Judges make remarks whether the teams are composed properly, whether there are juniors on the matter, whether there are candidates that are being trained. And these things, Stephen, they are not secrets, because when these judges are nominated as the Judicial Services Commission interviews, they are questioned on these things. They are questioned on their contribution towards transformation, whether at the level of being senior counsel, briefing young female juniors, having empowered them, and so forth and so on. So there's nothing new that the judge has raised. So there's nothing immoral from where we are seated, Stephen. We are saying the judge has not broken any rule. The judge is, in fact, what we call activist judiciary. This is what we need today. If the judge realizes that there's no transformation in the manner in which matters that are coming before him are being handled, he has got the discretion to make that remark to the participants, because that is what we call judicial activism.
Thank you very much indeed. Chris Mamathoncha is the Secretary General of the Black Lawyers Association. Your view, 086 000 2032.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Well, still issues around water in eThekwini. Some claims now that the problems we've seen in Verulam and Inanda are now spreading to places like Umbilo, and various claims around all of this at the moment. Sandile Mngadi is a DA ward councillor in eThekwini. Councillor Mngadi, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Morning, Stephen. How are you doing?
All right. What's the situation there at the moment?
So we found that from about last week Sunday, there was water pressure issues in the Mbilo Glenwood area, which is in central Durban. And they sort of went to the extreme when there was absolutely no water available for a couple of days here. We've had to get tankers daily to sort of support individuals, and there are a couple of old age homes. So it's quite a big issue. Since then, the city had released a report that they were maintaining the major Wiggins reservoir in the city, and water has returned, but subsequently water returned to this area and the whole of the south. So this is now Umlazi, and the Chatsworth area is seemingly now without water. So there's quite a big thing going on, and the city isn't being forthcoming with what they're doing to address the matter.
What do you believe the problem is? And we've heard about issues about maintenance in eThekwini in the past.
So it can't be a maintenance issue, right? Because, I mean, maintenance can't last in excess of 7 months in other areas. And so we're suspecting that there might be an issue with the bulk supply from Umgeni to Tugela water into the city, or that there are just discrepancies in how much water the city needs and the water that they're giving to us. And this is now prompting us to question whether the city should have a water license and is competent enough to handle water distribution for such a large metro. So, you know, as the DA in the city, that's something that we're investigating and we're going to be running with.
The Water Affairs and Sanitation Minister, Senzo Mchunu, he's been talking about this. He's been talking about eThekwini too. He also says that people shouldn't be using this for political purposes. And I realize this is a complicated space. I mean, the ANC said in its election manifesto over the weekend that they're going to fix water issues. Is this going to become, do you think, a big issue in the elections, the issue around water, and particularly in KZN and eThekwini?
Absolutely. You know, we've seen what Chris Pappas has been doing in the province. Water is the single biggest issue in KZN. It's not just in eThekwini. I mean, Jozini in the north of the province has one of the biggest dams in the province, but the city is dry. It is I mean, you know, we've been living with these power outages with load shedding now for a couple of years, but water is, you know, when we don't have it, it's a crisis. And we're seeing that instead of it's getting better, it's getting worse. And the information around what the real issue isn't clear, which is making a lot of us nervous. And so we wouldn't want to politicize the issue, but it's hard to ignore the fact that, you know, in other places, you know, I think the city of Cape Town is investing 10 billion rand over the next couple of years in water infrastructure, and we're not seeing that in other places. And so it becomes a political issue because it's now the matter of political will. If people actively want to change the situation around, I mean, we know with the rumors circulating around water tankers and the fact that a connected few are the individuals that lease out these tankers at exorbitant amounts of money to cities. So when you start connecting the dots, it is political.
Sandile Mngadi is a DA ward councillor in eThekwini. Thank you. 9 minutes now to 7.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Bit of traffic disruption coming in from the Vaal area this morning. A breakdown near Michelle Avenue on the R59 running north. And then as you get into the tunnel off the 59 onto the N12 East, there's a collision there causing a backlog through to 4 Trekker Road as well. So a couple of delays to work through. The N12 from Protea Glen inbound towards the Golden Highway exit at Eldos. That remains heavily backed up. If you're Protea Glen, you might want to think about a reroute through central Soweto and just avoiding the N12. It is particularly heavy. The N1 between Beyers Nordia and Rivonia up through sort of Randburg and Fourway is really busy this morning. Pretoria side, there's traffic lights down, Solomon Mslangu at Delphi, so that's quite slow, heading to Grasfontein Road. Pretoria generally is just really busy this Monday. Big queues on the Mopani Highway, big queues coming on SK and Puthlali Drive, very heavy going down the Dusport Tunnel, and Roger Dyson away from the industrial side, very slow, big backlogs of traffic through to the R101. That vehicle fire that we were talking about in Durban between Pavilion Mall and Paradise Valley still there. you're down an extra lane on top of the roadworks this morning. So if you've left Durban approaching Pinetown, that's why you're stuck in some queuing pressure. Also, the Kumashu Highway. The Kumashu is quite heavy. There's queues at Bestas, and then there's more queues from Malindela as you line up down towards the N2 highway. And Cape Town very busy all the way round. The N1 from Brackenfell to Kuburg interchange, that is noticeably busier. The M3's already backed up beyond Constantia through towards Paradise Road. No lights, M7, R300 coming out of Mitchell's Plain. Both of those routes are heavy. And you've got the normal backlogs on Marine Drive. That even looks a bit busier this morning from Sunningdale through to Sunset Beach. And then you've got some roadworks going on Marine Drive at Woodbridge Island. So that's heavy coming through from the high school, plus a bit of load shedding in the Milnerton and Century City areas as well to deal with. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Are you blowing your paycheck on car insurance every month? Monica, 39 from Three Rivers, pays just 1,515 Rand a month for a 2018 BMW 320i.
None of the insurance companies has come near to the price I'm paying. I am happy at OUTsurance. I'm going nowhere.
SMS out to 30754 now for a quick quote that could save you hundreds every month. You'll also find out about included benefits like panic assistance and Help It Out 24-hour roadside assistance. Yusuf, 45 from Tegadal, pays just 700 Rand a month for his 2021 VW Polo.
Help It Out took the family up to go and see the snow and I got stuck. The service was quick, even though it was in a very remote area. Absolutely phenomenal service from OUTsurance.
SMS out to 30754 now. That's out to 30754. OUTsurance is a licensed insurer and FSP. T's, C's, and limits apply. Premiums are risk profile dependent and reviewed annually. Client comments do not constitute financial advice.
Load shedding is a controlled way to balance the supply and demand of electricity on the power grid and to prevent a blackout. Eskom and government are working hard to solve the energy crisis and improve power generation capacity. If we all use only what we need, we could help reduce demand on the network and ultimately end load shedding together. Government and Eskom, working hard to reduce and ultimately end load shedding.
Big stories of the day. Hashtag SAFM Sunrise.
Good morning, 5 minutes to 7. You know the number, 086 000 2032. Hassan on the line from Johannesburg. Hi. You heard that conversation with the Black Lawyers Association?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, I think that, I think the alter ego will be AfriForum, who always seem to argue against changes that challenges the competency of blacks. I really think that the Black Lawyers Association, because they have an issue as well of whether they get employed in some of these jobs, have to become friends of the court because they can inform the process. But I think it's a very courageous step. But similarly, if we're talking about violence against women, you can't have white male lawyers talking or black male lawyers. What you really have to do is to get women who probably have experienced some form of violence and rape and that, so that it can inform the black experience, the gender experience, the woman's experience. And I think it's a brilliant move, and I support it.
Sure. Hassan, yeah, that's a really interesting idea, actually. I mean, I think it's a fascinating case, and I think that this is likely to sort of get some sort of political ammunition in some way. But let's see. I mean, sometimes stories you think will develop don't. 4 minutes now to 7.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
The University of Pretoria says it's going to court to try and stop a strike by Nahawu members, or some of their actions rather. Nahawu members are demanding a wage increase of 7%, a 13th check and a once-off bonus. The university said last week Nahawu members stopped people from coming onto the campus at certain entrances and was intimidating non-striking workers. The spokesperson for the University of Pretoria is Rikus Delpoort. Rikus, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen.
What do you believe the union has been doing here? What do you want a court to order?
Well, we've seen some of the union members preventing some of our staff and students entering our campus last week, and that's in the main the reason why we're getting why we have applied for this court order, the court interdict.
Okay, so you basically want the union to stop sort of illegal activity.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's a strike. Unions know that they're allowed to picket in the picketing area, and but as they start leaving that area and they start preventing our staff and our students from entering campus, then it becomes an illegal activity, and that's what we're trying to prevent.
The union says it wants 7%. I think you're offering 4%. Are you still negotiating?
Well, we were still negotiating on Friday, and I guess the negotiations will continue today. But yeah, that's where we are at the moment. Unions are demanding 7% and a whole lot of other things, while the university has said that we can only really afford 4%.
Okay, so increases I've heard of, 13th check I've heard of. Do you know what the once-off bonus demand is based on?
Yeah, where staff members were given a once-off bonus, and they're demanding that again. And obviously with the difficult situation that the university finds itself in, that's not possible at the moment. We've worked on a financial sustainability, sure that
seem to be losing Rikus Delport there, unfortunately. Sorry about that, but problems there, of course, with that connection. Try and continue that conversation at some point. As you know, there were disruptions last week, or certainly the university has reported that there were disruptions last week, and we have seen strikes like this in the past. You were there, SAFM. It's 2 minutes now to 7.
Stephen Grootes on SAFM.
All sorts of conversations this morning, I think, around jobs, and there were promises by the ANC last week to over the weekend rather, to grow jobs. This was part of their election manifesto. We, of course, will talk in a little while more about that. So we'll be talking about issues like that, and we'll speak to the ANC to get an understanding of how they would actually go about creating jobs. I do get the sense that water is going to become one of the issues that we see in the next little while. Also to come, by the way, I don't know if you noticed in the budget last week, there was some mention of electric cars and just building the electric car industry. I think it's really important that we start doing that. The car industry employs so many people, as you know. So we'll focus on that in an hour and a half from now. Maxwell on the line, I think from Tshwane. Maxwell, hi. The ANC manifesto, what did you make of it?
Stephen, good morning. It's a promise after the promise. My biggest worry is you can say anything, but how do you implement that at the end of the day? Because they have been promised us a lot of things, including that situation that the people who were troubling, they have left ANC. If you can look the likes of the General Secretary Nomvula Mokonyana, his name was keeping consistently in the Zondo Commission. And a lot of them are still within the ANC. What does it mean about that one? So it's so very interesting to me because we're heading for the news, the Kaizer Chiefs situation, Stephen Grootes. Come on. And the credit must be given to this doctor who happened to be an owner of the team that did Kaizer Chiefs yesterday. His name is Nkanti Pupuma. What a great strategist, because they were studying Kaizer Chiefs. And for Kaizer Chiefs management, they need to invest in their players rather than investing in making money, because their focus is to make more money, but they will never, or they don't want to invest in the team or buying quality players like Sundowns and Pirates.
All right, Maxwell in Tshwane, thank you. You squeezed a lot in there. Yeah, absolutely. You're there, SFM, leading the conversation, 7 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Top stories this hour. The ANC sends condolences to the families of the bus crash victims, and Limpopo police investigate the murder of a taxi boss. A very good morning to you. We start with election news. The ANC in Mpumalanga has sent its condolences to the families of their members who were killed in a bus crash on the R33 road between Vryheid and Paul Petersburg in KZN. The members were returning from the ANC rally held at the Moses Mabhida Stadium in eThekwini on Saturday. At least 9 members died in the bus crash and several others were admitted to hospital. Provincial ANC Secretary Muzichirwa says the members are from Mpuluzi in the Gert-Sibande region.
We learned that some were taken to the hospitals, however several were also passed on. So we're in the process of engaging the families and arranging the transport of those who are released from the clinic and the hospital.
The DA has given the ANC until today to hand over all the outstanding documents related to cadre deployment as directed by the Constitutional Court. The DA last week threatened to launch a contempt of court application to force the ANC to hand over more documents from its cadre deployment committee meetings. DA leader John Steenhuisen told a media briefing in Cape Town that they would also institute a criminal case against ANC Secretary-General Fikile Mbalula, whom he accused of seeking to hide President Cyril Ramaphosa's involvement in the Cater deployment saga. One of the 3 men accused of robbing people who went hiking at nature resorts in Marikana in the northwest will appear before the Brits Magistrates Court today. Organzo Penzambombe was remanded in custody by the same court on Monday last week. Police say a probe was conducted through a crime intelligence-driven operation after 3 armed robbery cases were reported in Marikana. Mbombe and the other 2 co-accused, Obvious Moyo and Prince Njove, also appeared before the Rustenburg Magistrates Court last week in connection with the robbing of tourists at nature reserves. Itumeleng Khajani reports.
In Rustenburg, Mbombe and his co-accused are facing charges of armed robbery and extortion. They will reappear in court on Thursday. The victims were reportedly robbed of various items, including a firearm, cellular phones, and clothing items. The victims were allegedly forced to electronically transfer money via cellular phones before they were released by the suspects. According to police, some of the items, as well as a firearm and a toy gun, were recovered during the arrest. Itumeleng Khajani, SABC News, Mahikeng.
Police have set up a task team to investigate the murder of a taxi owner at Moletlane in Zebediela, Limpopo. Police say the attackers were traveling by taxi and a sedan. They say they have recovered the spent cartridges for rifles and pistols. Police spokesperson Malesala Letwaba says the man was driving towards the local police station when he came under attack.
According to information, the victim was driving towards the local police station when unknown suspects driving a white taxi and a white sedan motor vehicle opened fire on his vehicle. The suspects then fled the scene. Police responded to the scene together with the emergency medical services. The victim's body was found inside his vehicle. During initial investigation, police recovered several spent cartridges for rifles and pistols at the scene.
And the Afghanistan Journalists Center, the AFJC, says the Taliban authorities in the southeastern Khost province have banned girls from making phone calls to radio stations and TV stations. The BBC's Anbarasan Etirajan has more.
The Afghan Journalists Organization said in a letter sent to media outlets, a local Taliban police chief had warned that some private radio stations were promoting moral corruption by broadcasting school lessons or social programs involving girls. The letter said that media officials would be summoned or prosecuted if they allowed girls to take part in the programs.
Recapping the top story this hour, the ANC in Mpumalanga has sent its condolences to the families of their members who were killed in a bus crash on the R33 road between Vryheid and Paul Petersburg in KZN. For SAFM News, Kemudupi Makhalemele.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines. Soccer action. Banyana are one step closer to Paris Olympics, and this after thrashing Tanzania. We also have shock as Kaizer Chiefs knocked out of the Nedbank Cup. We'll bring you the details just before 7:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It's a very busy Monday. Last week of the month can often bring bigger volumes of traffic, and we're seeing that this morning. There's literally traffic everywhere, including now a crash on the M1 South at Midrand. Looks like a truck has bumped into a car. It's happened at Olifantsfontein. Traffic from Pretoria through to Joburg already backlogging through Brockfontein interchange, looking pretty heavy. Also a bike hit down on the M1 between Beyers Nordia and Malabongwe, so some really heavy traffic starting to back up from 14th Avenue. N12 in from Protea Glen towards Eldorado Park remains a heavy queue as well. Lots of issues around Durban, a truck fire incident before Paradise Valley, traffic going out of Durban just after Spaghetti Junction, passing Pavilion Mall, gets really heavy. That truck fire in the roadwork section as well. A lot of traffic along the Kumashu Highway coming down from Kumashu through Bestas and then again through sort of Dust Road area. A lot of traffic this morning by the Kumashu Highway standards. And Cape Town, the M1 inbound, a lot of pressure there from Brackenfell right through to the Coburg interchange this morning. No lights, M7, R300, so if you're coming out of Mitchell's Plain, that's heavy. And roadworks on Marine Drive both causing a second queue. You've got the delays table for you to Sunset Beach, and then you hit the roadwork queue coming past the high school down towards Woodbridge Island. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
Good morning, just gone 8 minutes after 7. You're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes. In a moment, you'll hear from Mameloko Kubai, the Minister of Human Settlements, but she'll be speaking as a member of the ANC's NEC about, of course, the ANC's election manifesto. You'll hear from Dr. Ngama and Tunker as well, the political analyst. You'll mediate a conversation from 8:30 this morning, of course, around electric cars, the electric car industry, and how all of that is changing. A lot's going on around the world on this. If we miss out, we could miss out big time. Thousands of jobs in the Eastern Cape and Tshwane could go. All of that to come this morning. You know the number 086 000 2032, 8 after 7.
Imagine if you could save time like you save money. A second here, a minute there. Type a little faster, walk a little faster. Or you could stop scrolling on the internet. Just think of all the hours you'll save. Now what if you could take all that time and invest it? Watch it grow. Until eventually, one day, you'd have so much time that you wouldn't know what to do with it all. But unfortunately, time doesn't work like that. It can't be stored or banked. And unlike money, you can't make it back. That's why after 50 years of investing, we've learned that time is the greatest gift of all. And the good news is, if you invest early, time gives you money. And then money gives you more time to do whatever you want to do, even if it is scrolling on the internet. Ellen Gray, long-term investing. Ellen Gray is an authorized FSP.
Mzansi Africa.
Siyabonga.
Siyabulela nangomso.
Thank you for witnessing the Africa Cup of Nations Cote d'Ivoire 2023 in your language of choice on SABC radio stations, digital platforms, and SABC TV channels.
Big ups to Unilever for being on board.
Your magnificent and heartwarming support gave millions of South Africans a spectacular and exhilarating experience during AFCON.
Asonye. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Agenda-setting conversations of the day.
10 after 7, good morning. With the big launch of the ANC's election manifesto over the weekend, the ANC leader, President Cyril Ramaphosa, promising the party would create around 2.5 million jobs, it would grow the economy, reduce crime, sort out water problems, and fix potholes. He also said that it would ensure only moral leaders who pass through the eye of the needle, would be allowed to represent the ANC in Parliament and provincial legislatures after the elections. Ramaphosa was speaking in front of a packed Moses Mabhida Stadium on Saturday afternoon. We start your coverage this morning with Dr. Ngama Mtimka, the political analyst. Dr. Mtimka, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning to you and your listeners, Stephen. Thank you for having me.
The ANC focusing again in this manifesto on creating jobs. Other parties are too. Obviously, if you look at our society, creating jobs is the big issue. How important is that to voters?
It is very important. So when we look at these political parties, the questions always arise as to how much do each of them recognize what is imperative, what is dictated by the reality on the ground, and what's their novelty in terms of proposals to change. So we don't expect any political party in South Africa not to mention jobs. The question becomes what their plans are to ensure that they change the situation. And that's a function of two things, both their plans as well as voter perceptions about whether they are capable as a party to deliver those.
I suppose one of the problems that the ANC has, it's the governing party, so it's promised to create jobs before. Is it going to be judged on its track record and what it's done in the past, or is it going to be judged on what it promises? And obviously it'll be different for every voter.
Yeah, so two things about that, Stephen. And I want to draw two things, one from the speech of the president and then the manifesto. If you listen to the speech only, it just lacked that thing of this is a governing party that's speaking here, in the sense that it spoke about job creation in very abstract terms for my liking. Whereas, I mean, this is a governing party that should be speaking, in more direct ways. When I looked at the manifesto, I realized that this was a matter of somebody sleeping on their job when it comes to the speech writing, because in the manifesto itself, there are some ideas which are feasible. The last one, I think that what's going to happen is voters are not going to judge it on its potential, but what it has done. That, unfortunately, being judged on potential is something only opposition parties have the luxury of. If you're a governing party, people are going to struggle to believe what you say by word, when by deed the behavior has been to the contrary for 30 years.
The ANC says it'll fix things like potholes, it will reduce crime. These are big promises. There are huge problems in these areas. Do you think the party's heard the problems that people are talking about? Do you think it's sort of understood how people are feeling at the moment? And you'll know, Dr. Mtimka, I mean, just here on SFM we hear voice notes, we hear calls, people very angry at the ANC. Do you think the ANC understands that?
For me, there's no ambiguity. If I look at the manifesto again, there's no ambiguity that the party understands problems in South Africa. But what I think it does not appreciate is how much of the potential of the ANC to become greater is linked to its leadership, character, and approach to leadership selection. So there's reference to a process of renewal to get new leaders, while at the same time, debates are still going on about what to do with people allegedly fingered in corruption in the Zondo report. So that kind of a party whose ultimate problem is not conceptualization of South Africa's problems or understanding thereof, but leadership that cripples the ability of the party to be responsive. That's the issue. So its written documents will always, in my view, be as close to reality as it can only be, operating in a country like South Africa where citizens are vocal. But the ability to execute is a challenge for the party, and in fact it has no real thoroughgoing transformation of the party that is inspiring confidence. The same people the president hopes to convince live in cities where there has not just been pothole for the last few weeks or months, there's been potholes for years that are not being fixed.
So, I mean, this also gets to the heart of something. I mean, the president saying that only leaders who pass through the eye of the needle will represent the party. From what we can see, and I mean, we don't know yet, we haven't seen the full sort of list, but could it still be that people who were implicated in the Zondo Commission could still represent the ANC in Parliament and in the provincial legislatures? Is that going to be, as you say, is that going to turn into a big political issue during these elections? It could almost be a fundamental issue.
It's going to be the big political issue, especially from the opponents of the ANC that are center-right, from the Democratic Alliance to those that are centrist, and the new kids on the block. That's the essence of their campaign is around that. Then internally within the ANC, unfortunately, if we know the party vintage ANC, come election time, there will be those people who have been fingered in the Zondo Commission. Reason being, in the final analysis, decision making in political parties in general, but in the ANC in particular, is subject to power dynamics and not the ideals that are cherished and talked about much.
The stadium was full on Saturday. Obviously, the ANC is facing a challenge from Jacob Zuma's Umkhonto weSizwe. The fact it was full, does that matter?
I know we do say in isiXhosa, isizima siviwa ngodondolo, or you test the depth of a well by a rod first. I don't think that filling stadiums to the brim is an indicator of how likely these parties are going to perform during the election. It's a hotly contested province, and it contributes significantly to the national average. And I think that for them to reverse the downward trend is going to be really an uphill battle facing ferocious opponents like the MK Party and others, obviously, should they overcome all the hurdles that are legal, that MK Party.
Dr. Mgamram Timkip, thanks very much indeed, political analyst. Really appreciate the time. You're with SFM, 17 minutes after 7. Well, let's hear from the ANC themselves now. And let's speak to a member of the ANC's National Executive Committee, Mamaloko Kobai. She's also the Minister of Human Settlements. Minister, good morning, and thank you for your time on SFM this morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Good morning to your listeners.
What for you are the main points of your manifesto?
We've got 6 priorities, Stephen, in terms of our manifesto. But most importantly, I think what we're trying to say here, if you go into detail with the manifesto, is that we are government, we are a party that has been in government, we acknowledge that, and therefore we're utilizing our basis of existence and things that we have been able to plan to refocus ourselves and go and detail with what we have received feedback from our constituencies and our voters, but more importantly to show that experience that we have gained over the last 30 years becomes a foundation for us to be able to move forward. If you look at issues such as your dealing with the cost of living, as one of the areas where many of the people who have had opportunities, whether going to school, getting a job, but still face hurdles in terms of being able to sustain their cost of living. Taking into context that we know we operate in a global context, therefore we've got to look at what are our abilities in the country to be able to cushion South Africans, and that's what we're committing to.
Minister, you make big promises, and yet I think you're also being judged on your track record. So people, for example, will look at what you say about creating jobs, and we have a huge unemployment. We have huge unemployment under the ANC. So what will you then do differently to create jobs in the next 5 years that you haven't done before?
Stephen, if we look at, it's good to be evaluated on a track record, but also I think it has to be done fairly. We've done quite a lot as the ANC in this country, and that does not wipe away the challenges that remains. Let's say, for example, we were in Moses Mabhida, and this is what we have said. When we say ANC has not created jobs completely, it can't be that it has not over the years done anything. Let's look, and that's why we reflect from an economic point of view. Even when we've been able to see the economy growing, we've not had jobs in the manner that it does. But we've cautioned South Africans against the 2008 meltdown, financial meltdown. That's why today you have, for example, many of us who grew up in Soweto would remember 1994 as we were getting into the democracy. Your whole Midrand area didn't exist. It developed, it created jobs. It created opportunities. Your Mall of Africa, as developments that happened in those areas. You talk about King Shaka Airport, that never existed. Today, we were flying from KwaZulu-Natal to Gauteng, for example, after the rally, through that airport. Those are initiatives that never existed, that the ANC government has been able to do. And that's why we are saying, yes, there are challenges, but equally, there are successes that this government have been able to. We faced COVID-19. We never anticipated. But we never sat back and said we can't do anything. We came with an economic recovery plan, reconstruction and recovery plan, that provided support for SMMEs, which were, by the way, could have been wiped out by COVID. When workers were facing possible retrenchment in workplace, we came in, utilized the UIF to say to employers, don't retrench them, but let's pay the salaries, keep them in your work environment. Those are the things that we've been able to do. We faced the Russia and Ukraine conflict. That has led to the cost of living going higher because we import quite a lot of petroleum products which are inputs towards our livelihood. And those are the things that we are acknowledging as ANC, to say we've got to now focus in this area. Yes, we are doing these others. And infrastructure development will be able to see us in terms of growth and be able to create the jobs that we want.
Okay, so if Russia's invasion of Ukraine led to a higher cost of living here, was Russia wrong to invade Ukraine?
Pardon?
If Russia's invasion of Ukraine led to a higher cost of living for South Africans, made food more expensive in South Africa, as you've just said, was Russia then wrong to invade Ukraine?
I'm not going to get into the debate whether it's an invasion or it's a conflict between and others fighting. I don't want to get into that. But that conflict has led to what we see in terms of high cost of living because of the availability of materials across in terms of petroleum products, but also the effect of COVID. We can't ignore it. China has been affected in terms of, so there are quite a number of things. China is very critical in terms of the value chain, Stephen. When you look at that and what is happening, the Cold War between China and U.S. also impacts in terms of that. Now we have the Middle East conflict that is impacting as well in the world peace, but also you look at what is happening in the value chain, does affect us. So what we have to acknowledge is that we operate in a global society. Yes, there will be things that we can caution South Africans in terms of the national priorities and what we do, but there are those that we've got to work with our partners globally to be able to respond to so that we do not have more impact on us.
Minister, one of the big promises you make in your manifesto and your leader, President Ramaphosa, made on the stage is about leadership. There'll be moral and ethical leadership. And the President said, I think the phrase was, only people who can go through the eye of the needle, which is an ANC document, will represent the party after the elections. So does that mean then that none of the people implicated in the Zondo Commission, none of the people whom the Zondo Commission made findings about, will be on your party lists?
Yeah, the process in terms of the current representatives, which I think will have more better conversations with the people who are responsible, which is Comrade Kgalema Motlanthe as the chair of the commission. So I don't want to overlap. But what we are saying as leadership is that we have put guidelines to say those who are going to represent us shouldn't be people who are found wanting. And that's why one of the things we've put in as the ANC is that if I have allegations I face, I should approach or I will be appearing before the Integrity Commission. No party has such a provision. We as the ANC have, and it's out of our experience and learning that we have to be of moral high ground. Today, Stephen, compared to previously, we submit your CV, you submit copies of your qualifications, you also you do financial disclosures of your assets and liabilities, you also submit fingerprints, and you go through interviews. In the interviews, you are asked about a lot of things, including if there are issues that you should be responding to. And that process is still ongoing. We have not finalized it. We don't know what has been the decision of the Electoral Commission. And out of that, then I think Comrade Kgalema Motlanthe will be able to respond.
Okay.
But it's a principal matter that we are raising, that we have turned the tide and we understand that there must be vetting, there must be scrutiny on the people that represent us.
Okay,
in
you
relation to Zondo,
yeah.
Yes.
I'm sorry, Minister, to interrupt, but none of those people, 95 of those people who were implicated in the Zondo Commission did not go to the Integrity Commission. That's what the Reverend Frank Chikane told us on this radio station. 95. I'm not aware that any of them have gone there since then.
I think the Secretary General would have indicated that those that had not appeared before the Integrity Commission, what we have taken as a decision is that they will go through the DC process.
Okay.
Now,
and have any of them gone through that process?
When you go into the interview, then you are asked whether you are facing any disciplinary process or not. And out of that, remember, it's a selection process. So it's cleaning in the process. So that's what I'm saying. Wait until the final list is out. Then judge us out of that final list. I think now we are making speculation.
Okay, but then, say for example, Deputy Water Affairs Minister David Mahlobo. We heard the testimony that he was walking out of the State Security Agency with millions of rand, in cash. The Commission made findings against him. Findings have been made by Sifiso Buthelezi. Findings have been made by Parliament against Deputy Minister Dipuo Peters, and she's still a Deputy Minister. So you're saying none of those people, if what you say is correct, none of those people could come back?
I'm not going to respond in detail on that because I don't think it's my space because I'm not involved in that, Stephen. I'm saying what we took as a decision as the NSC is that we have an obligation to put a list that will give confidence to the public. So the mandate to the people who are running the list process is that give us a list that will give confidence to the public, that would ensure that our work towards renewal is evident that we are committed to renewal as this leadership. And lastly, again, Stephen, there are two things that we need to note what ANC has done. ANC has said to us, if you are a member, you are deployed, and you are found wanting, you appear before the Integrity Commission. Then the Integrity Commission will indicate whether I need to step aside based on the recommendation. So if they haven't said that, there is no basis for us to make allegations against that individual, because again, that individual would have had to appear before the court. Now, there are individuals that we remember that said, we are taking this thing to review because there are certain issues that have not been considered. Those individuals also need to be given an opportunity. But let's look back. It's not only now. You'd remember in 2019, Comrade Nombula was asked not to go to Parliament. She qualified. So it can be correct that we say ANC is not committed, has never acted. There have been possibilities or areas where there's been acting. Yes, because you do not want to violate individuals' rights, where you act on rumors, where you act on no process that has been followed. We are a constitutional organization, and if we do things, we must follow process so that even those individuals do not take us to court and win, because they would have infringed on their rights. So similarly, we've got to observe our own constitution and the country's constitution.
Minister, thank you. Mameloko Kubai is the Minister of Human Settlements, but speaking here as a member of the National Executive Committee of the ANC. Do appreciate the time, 28 after 7.
Mzansi Africa.
Siyalobuga.
Siyabulela nangomso.
Thank you for witnessing the Africa Cup of Nations Cote d'Ivoire 2023 in your language of choice on SABC radio stations, digital platforms, and SABC TV channels.
Big ups to Unilever for being on board.
Your magnificent and heartwarming support gave millions of South Africans a spectacular and exhilarating experience during AFCON.
Asibonge. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Free State Provincial Government, under the leadership of Premier Mxolisi Dukwana, will host the much-anticipated Free State Investment Conference. The conference seeks to promote the province as an investment destination through showcasing strategic investment projects. Do join us on the 27th of February 2024 at the University of the Free State's main campus in Bloemfontein. The Free State Provincial Government, harnessing partnerships, stimulating growth and development through investment.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning, Banyana.
Yes, their mission in Tanzania complete. 3-0 was their win over the Twiga Stars, but Coach Desiree Ellis is very cautious.
We have to finish the job back home. We don't want to become complacent. 3-0, people would say it's already a score that wins you the tie, but the next goal in the match could change things, and we have to score the next goal. And once that is over, then we'll worry. We'll just have to face whoever's in front of us, be it Nigeria, be it Cameroon, but we still have a job to do. So we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We want to make sure that we finish the job and then, concentrate on who we need to play, and then work out how we're going to plan that.
Nedbank Cup last 32 results saw Kaizer Chiefs out. They lost 5-4 on penalties by Minnows Milford FC last night. Maritzburg United, they saw third-tier side Paul United 3-0. And at the Free State Stadium, the General beat Madritas 2-0 to progress to the last 16 in what was a battle between amateur sides. And Chippa United, they had to dig deep 2-1 for victory over NC Professionals. Supersport United's hope of reaching the CAF Confed Cup knockout stages ended after the 1-1 draw against Modern Future, and that took place at Peter Mokaba Stadium yesterday. Elsewhere, Liverpool won the League Cup in dramatic fashion. 1-0 was their win against Chelsea. And finally, netball, the baby Proteas are looking to return to continental glory when they take to the court for the Netball World Cup Youth 2025 Africa qualifiers next month in March. And that's when we'll bring you more details on Sunrise Headlines Top of the Hour. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Good morning. You with SFM leading the conversation. Lots to come in the next half hour. It's stage 2 now, stage 3 later, 7:30.
Thanks, Stephen. A very good morning. With the news headlines, ke Modupi Makgalemele. The DA's KZN Premier candidate Chris Papa says he would focus on cutting the bloated boards of state entities to make money available for basic service delivery should he be elected to lead the province. The ANC in Mpumalanga has sent its condolences to the families of their members who were killed in a bus crash on the R33 road between Vryheid and Paul Petersburg in KZN. And the Afghanistan Journalist Center says the Taliban authorities in the southeastern Khost province have banned girls from making phone calls to radio stations and to TV stations. Details of these and other stories at 8.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Good morning. The crash on the M1 South at Olifantsfontein Road has been moved to the left shoulder, but it's causing a big backlog of traffic this morning, largely due to onlookers and the earlier build-up. So from John Foster through to Olifantsfontein, it's heavy. Samrand Road and Olifantsfontein to come onto the highway, both busy as well. Biker knockdown between Beyers-Naudé and Malabongwe. The M1 North from 14th Avenue is under pressure, and a collision on the R24 arriving in from the airport onto the N12. So backlogging traffic coming in from the airport towards Gilulis, and a crash on the N3 North at Heldenace now, so it stays really heavy coming out of Alberton and Germiston through Elands Interchange and up past Cement Factory. Also the N12 from Lenasia, Protea Glen still queuing up towards the Golden Highway exit inbound at Eldorado Park. Durban, there's a breakdown and a vehicle fire now on the N3 before you get to the M13 Paradise Valley, leaving Durban. Big queues from Spaghetti Junction territory. M7 through the N2 down to Bel Air and to Wakesley, that's heavy. I think a lot of that is the roadworks as you pick up sort of Bel Air Road up to Chief Albert Lutuli. That Bel Air Road between Rick Turner and the M7 is very heavily backed up, and I think that's causing the problem on the M7 bluffbound into that Bel Air junction. Cape Town, big queues on the approaches to Stellenbosch, whether you're on the 44 coming in from Paarl or the 44 coming up from Somerset West. It's very heavily backed up. N1 from Brackenfell through to the Cooper interchange is heavy, and a combination of some load shedding and a collision on Sable Road towards the N1. So motorists coming out from Century City stuck in a heavy queue towards the highway this morning. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
The business update on SAFM.
Ray Machlaka, good morning again. Asian markets, US markets, how are they looking?
Well, in this current trading session, both markets are mostly down. Investors are cautious because it is a big week on the economic front. Consumer inflation data from the US, Japan, and Europe are expected this week, and the data could provide more clarity on the outlook for global interest rates. So in Asian markets, Hong Kong's Hang Seng is down 0.6%, China's Shanghai Composite is down 0.4%, and Japan's Nikkei is up 0.5%. And before the US market opens later today, the US futures market is down. Nasdaq, Dow Jones, and S&P futures are each down 0.2%. And in the currency market, the dollar to the rand is weaker at 19.32. Concerns around inflation and interest rates in the US are weakening the local currency.
And then we've only addressed 5 of the 23 actions we need to exit the grey list.
Yeah, exactly a year ago, South Africa was grey listed by a watchdog called the Financial Action Task Force. Being grey listed means that South Africa has weak measures in place to prevent money laundering, financial crimes, and terrorism financing. So South Africa is seen as a haven for such crimes. The Financial Action Task Force, or FATF, says South Africa has only addressed 5 out of the 23 concerns that it has raised. FATF says South Africa must still do more to curb money laundering and show that it can investigate and prosecute complex financial crimes such as state capture. So South Africa looks set to remain on the grey list for another year.
And then job cuts at Sibanye-Stillwater. They've been nearly halved, but it's still 2,000 people.
Yeah, in October last year, Sibanye-Stillwater announced that 4,100 jobs would be cut at its platinum mining operations. Since then, Sibanye-Stillwater has been in retrenchment talks with workers and their trade unions. So far, 2,100 jobs have been cut through a voluntary and involuntary retrenchment process. More job losses are expected in the mining sector. Anglo American Platinum and Kumba Iron Ore plan to cut nearly 4,000 jobs.
Sure. Thanks very much indeed, Ray Machlaka. Ray, of course, back back tomorrow. More business news through the day here on SFM.
Call us on 086 000 2032.
Clement on the line from Polokwane. Clement, hi. The ANC election manifesto. What do you make of it, Clement?
Hi, Stephen. I think, Stephen, it will always be difficult to judge the manifesto or the potential of the opposition parties who have not been in government to tell whether they will deliver on those manifestos. But with ANC, it should be an easy thing. I'm not an ANC person or even an ANC supporter, but I think it should be an easy thing to judge them because they've presented many manifestos before and they've been in government. So it should be easy to go back and look at the manifesto of ANC 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And then we look at the things that they promised. And then from there, we judge them whether they've delivered on those things. For example, I remember one of the very first manifestos, it was more about housing, about roads, about electricity. Let's check whether have they delivered on those things. Are there houses that from based on the manifesto? Are there electricities that were delivered in the rural areas? Are there roads that they built? Those are the kilometers of the roads that they built. And I like what this lady, Mamuluku, explained on the issue of jobs, that looking at what was happening in the world, ANC is basically saying it could have been worse.
Yeah.
We are not saying, they are not saying they delivered the jobs as they intended, but they are saying it could have been worse.
Okay,
but
yeah.
now, because of their intervention, now things are where they are now.
All right. No, Clement, I hear you. Thank you on the line from Polokwane. That's an interesting way of looking at it. I don't know if everyone will see it like that. Bond on the line from Gqeberha. Bond, hi. The Black Lawyers Association, their support for Judge Mandla Nkosi-Motha. What do you make of it?
Good morning, Stephen, and your honorable listeners. Without doubt, transformation is necessary in general in South Africa and the judiciary itself, and every patriot has to carry it in his or her heart, transformation. The essence of what the PLA is saying is correct. The acts of the judge are courageous, but they have to differ on three aspects. Number one, there are three places for this. Number one, if, for instance, in chambers or in the judge's offices, you call the parties or they gather for an in-house matter, he could address that and say, gentlemen, you want me to talk about BE, but you are all male and all white. Do you still want me to go to court in jest, in chambers? Number two, in court, but not before the trial. At the end, in his judgment, the judgment of a presiding officer is divided into two. There's the binding part of the judgment called the reasons for judgment, and there's the non-binding part that is passing comments. He can make that in his passing comments part.
It's called can't remember.
I didn't want to sound.
Yes,
you are a lawyer. I didn't want to sound sophisticated. It's obituary dicta.
That
is reasons that are not binding. That's the second one. Thirdly, if he or she is invited as a speaker on transformation in the law, you talk about that, because when people are before you, the only time when you address them in court is when they are not properly dressed, and number two, they do not have the right of appearance, but that you can save them by calling them to chambers, not there, because those lawyers should not even have agreed to go and write a submission why they're all black. They should have simply said, we lawyers are creatures of instructions. We don't instruct ourselves. Go to our instructing clients, or let the justice, chief justice, or Department of Justice write to our people that instructed us why you are here. So he was out of order, with due respect, by saying so, or even seriously go and write submissions. There's a time and place for everything. That is the rule that applies. There's a time and place for everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bond. All right, interesting view there from Bond. And, Bond, of course, is an attorney, as I understand it, in Gqeberha, knows his way around the courts. It's a very interesting issue. I think there's a lot to talk about with that, and with what the judge said when he said to all of the white legal teams. I think one of the lawyers was a woman, I must just say, and said, look, I'm not happy with this. You need to explain to me why you're all white. Ike in the Western Cape. Ike, hi. Clearly you're traveling. The ANC?
Yes, how are you doing?
I'm well. Ike, just as loudly as you can, please. Go for it.
I'm very pleased. I am very much worried.
All right. Ike, I'm sorry, we can't hear you. I'm going to ask him to just have a chat, see if we can sort that out, because we do want to hear from you. Thank you. Solomon in KwaZulu-Natal, hi. The ANC Election Manifesto.
Good morning, Stephen. Thank you for taking my call. I will be brief. I just want to comment around what I've observed from what the president of the ANC has presented as the manifesto. It's a tactical shift in terms of focus and emphasis. Normally, the ANC before prioritized education and health in their sequence of priorities, but this time around, they've put forward something talking to the creation of jobs and the building of economy and inclusive economy for that matter, followed by matters of cost of living and so on.
Yeah.
I think that is out of the observation that much as not everything has been done around education and health, but there is almost universal access to education at the tertiary level and otherwise. And health, there are challenges, but I think there is now access. Well, quality matters still remain to be attended to. The most important thing, I think, which the government must focus into is to build the economy so that it can provide jobs and quality life for people of South Africa. Otherwise, if that is not done, this dream of this democracy is going to grow up in the thin air.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I keep saying this is the biggest long-term problem we have is unemployment and youth unemployment. If we don't fix that, it almost doesn't matter what else we fix.
Yeah, that is true. That is true, because people are rendered despondent and lethargic because not that they are beggars and they are lazy. There is no opportunity for them to fend for their families and improve their lives.
Solomon, thank you, Solomon, on the line from KwaZulu-Natal. Let's stay in KZN. Dumasani, hi.
Hi, how are you? Morning.
Go for it.
Yes. Sorry, I just wanted to just go through the people are just worried about the numbers at the stadium for each party. I think at this point, South Africans need to be aware of one thing, that it doesn't matter how many numbers that we have in the stadium, or if we can fill up or not, that means we're going to win elections. Otherwise, the DA, the EFF would have won elections by now. I think we should be conscious of the fact that the ANC, in terms of card-carrying members, they have about 1.5, 1.6 million of people. And if you look at the numbers when Jacob Zuma was president, that will come up to the manifestos is much higher. But to win government, you need about 10 million to 11 million voters.
Yeah.
And those that 8.5 million voters, they're not card-carrying members. So those are the people that vote. So it doesn't matter if you have 70,000 in a stadium, but it doesn't mean you're going to win elections.
Yeah.
It just means that you still have some numbers to fill up the stadium.
Yeah.
Because if it went to numbers, the EFF would have won elections a long time ago.
So I mean, Dumasani, I think you're right. I mean, absolutely you're right. I think there is a question about logistics, though. And if a party can arrange to have a full stadium, it can do the buses and all the rest, then it can also arrange a strong election campaign. Do you see what I mean?
Yes. I get you. So I was looking at the social media and the reaction of people said we filled the stadium, and I look at previous manifestos, it was full, and people saying it was full and we're going to win elections again. And I'm like, the actual voters are not card-carrying members of any political party. So we're still going to see in May who is really has the numbers behind them, and it's not about filling stadiums and then saying that we're going to win elections, but I guess it's a marketing tool for political parties that we fill the stadium and that stadium. It just lingers in my head that most people are starting to say the ANC will be back. Technically, I think voters will have a word and say on how we go forward on this one.
No, Dumasani, thank you. In KwaZulu-Natal, I think it's an important point to make about stadiumology. Does it matter? 14 minutes now to 8.
Conversations that you connect with and react to. SAFM.
Well, huge issues in the last little while around violence in schools. And you'll remember just 10 days ago, that 13-year-old primary school learner who shot his principal at the Primrose Primary School in Germiston. I mean, he fired 3 shots. There have been other issues. In KwaZulu-Natal, for example, a deputy principal was attacked by a group of former learners inside the school. People saw it happen. I don't think anyone was able to stop it. There have been other cases as well. The director at NAPTOSA, the executive director at the teaching union NAPTOSA, is Basil Manuel. Basil, good morning. Thanks for your time this morning.
Good morning, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
We've had violence in schools for a long time. Are there indications the situation is getting worse and perhaps more deadly?
Stephen, certainly some of the actions we are seeing of late are more deadly, but discipline is not in free fall. I need to stress that. But I do think that there are telling dangers that have to make us sit up, because learners have access to far more dangerous weapons. It is not just standing up and being insolent and so on. Now there are knives, there are bush knives. We've had an incident in Limpopo where a principal was knocked over the head and so on. So there are certainly telltale signs of more violent behavior.
We all know that this is also because of what's happening in our society and because of what's happening at parents. And I mean, in the case in Joburg, for example, the child obviously took their parents' firearm. That's what we've been told. Are you worried that, and I mean, I know that we have, very difficult family issues in our country and for lots of different reasons, often to do with our history. Are you worried that sort of all of this is having an impact on teachers? Teachers are often asked to do things that parents should do.
Stephen, and that has been also a relatively age-old issue, because our teachers, as they are today, are doing far more things than should be. Take, for example, with the youngster in Primrose, where were the early warning systems? But there was nobody to intervene because there are no teacher counselors. And that has been one of NAPTOSA's cries for a long time. A teacher with 40 kids per class hardly has time to see and notice the little changes that happen and when intervention is needed. However, if there was another person who's an expert at this, it is very easy to say, please follow up on this. I'm not too comfortable with how things are going. But of course, in the absence of that, it's all dependent on a single teacher who must take issues to the principal, and sometimes too late for both of them to react. But in this particular instance, the teacher did notice differences, the principal did react, and that of course resulted in another type of reaction. So yes, there are serious deficits within the system that can be sorted out.
Basil, I've been astonished to see over the last few days and in various places, letters, things like that, people saying that we should reinstate corporal punishment. In other words, learners should be smacked, beaten, hit, assaulted, whichever phrase you prefer to use. I mean, when I was growing up, you had corporal punishment at schools. It might well have been the same for you. Would that make any difference whatsoever? I've been quite surprised to see these calls, considering it was banned, over 25 years ago.
Stephen, I want to be very categorical about this. I don't believe it's a solution to the problem. You cannot address violence with more violence. And our learners come from a community, many communities, where the natural reaction to anything is violence. And so they bring that into the school as well. And now if the school has to reinforce that, then we are getting nowhere with addressing the broader societal issue of violent behavior. So no, NAPTOSA will never support that. And we will be strongly talking more and more about this. There are many teachers that believe it should be done, but we continue to say to them, it's not a solution.
Basil Manuel, thank you, Executive Director at NAPTOSA. Really appreciate the time.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It's a busy one between Pretoria and Joburg this morning. A crash now just after the old Joburg road, left lane blocked, and then the crash at Olifantsfontein. So it's all just a bit sluggish from Brockfontein interchange territory. Crash after Beyers Nordier on the N1 going north. That traffic now backed up almost towards Mareisburg. If you're leaving Soweto on your way through Randburg to Four Ways, it's a heavy Monday morning. Also a collision on the N3 north at Heldenace interchange. Traffic coming up from Germiston and Alberton remains heavily backed up through Elands and up past the cement cement factory, and a crash before you even get into that on the N3 approaching Heidelberg Road, so coming past Spraitview. That's quite busy as well. Durban, a major delay still coming out of Durban towards Pinetown with that truck fire incident before Paradise Valley. The back of the queue is at Spaghetti Junction. Keep in mind you've got lane restrictions for roadworks and lane closure now due to this truck fire, so it's all very heavy. M7 down to Bel Air is heavy towards the Bluff, and then Bel Air Road back up both ways between the M7 and Rick Turner due to some roadworks. And if you're Durban bound coming through Peter Maritzburg, it's a broken down truck before Market Road, and that's why that queue is so heavy. It's almost back towards sort of Chotamotala territory, certainly back towards Ortman Road. And don't forget today, the N3 and the R103 between Linfield Park and Ashburton, full closures of both of those roads at the same time. Linfield Park, Ashburton, 2:30 until 3 p.m. 30-minute blast today. That'll repeat Wednesday as well. Cape Tunnel, fairly busy, particularly Sable Road coming out of Century City towards the N1 highway. There was an earlier crash and probably some traffic lights out with load shedding, and just very generally busy around the southern suburbs. Rondebosch, Rosebank, Claremont, Newlands. There's a lot of delays this morning. Newlands Avenue, Paradise Road up to the M3, Rhodes Drive up to the M3 coming in from Kirstenbosch, and just generally around sort of Palmyra, Campground Road around the schools. It's all very busy. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Big stories of the day. #SAFM Sunrise.
Very interesting issues coming up around electricity, and you know, of course, no matter almost where you are around the country, you have so many long-running problems with electricity. And sometimes places go through sort of phases. You know, in eThekwini we've been talking about water. In Joburg, issues in city power, where they've had long-running issues. In some cases, people complaining about being without electricity for a very long time. So in the eastern suburbs of Joburg, there have been problems in areas around Yeoville, Bellevue, Observatory, Bruma. What happened was, as I understand it, that there was basically a big outage. There was a big problem at a substation in the Observatory area. It burnt down. That means that actually keeping power going on there is very difficult, and that means that there are regular power cuts. Charles Luane is the Group Executive for Service Delivery Centers. Charles Luane is the Group Executive for Service Delivery Centers and Maintenance at City Power. Charles, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, and thanks for inviting us. Very good morning to you as well.
As I understand it, the problem started with the substation in Observatory. It burnt down. What happened?
Indeed. In December, we did experience that major outage, and the control room burned down by its own entirety. So in the process, it was also discovered that the 88 kV cable, oil-filled cable, had faulted, and as a result, it created more problems onto our network. But safe to say that all these challenges, we have temporarily tried to rebuild the control room, and as we speak now, the 63-year-old cable, which is oil-filled cable, is being repaired because we've encountered multiple faults even after the restoration of the first fault. And there's only one company in the whole country that is able to do this kind of highly skilled technical joint. So the team is on site. So we anticipate that by the end of this week that we have started, all should be well and go, and we should be able to stabilize this area while we are planning for the long-term solutions, is to lay new cables in that area. Thank you.
There's only one company that can fix this cable. Wow.
Yeah, there's only one company currently that is able to fix this type of technology. In the entire country, they move all over the city in all provinces, not all over the city, in all provinces of the country where this type of cables are available in those areas.
So this means then, as I understand it, that there are lots of problems in this part of eastern Joburg. So obviously if you've got a substation out, that's a big problem. Why are there now so many knock-on problems all the time?
So you can imagine, this network is not designed to go on and off at the rate at which the load shedding is affecting and impacting the infrastructure. And this infrastructure, some of its components, you run them for failure, while some you maintain them in the process as you run them for failure. So you can just imagine the impact it has on different stages, on day-to-day basis. And this equipment just pops, and it therefore means it warrants us to respond as it fails. So as time goes on, I think it is important that we quickly respond to or expedite the process of bringing these new technologies for IPTs and so forth, so that we are able to stabilize the network as it is. So it's a whole lot of issues over and above the theft and vandalism and the inclement weather and so forth. So if the network is not stable as a result of those, then it creates this kind of problems.
So once you get this particular cable and the substation fixed, would that take a lot of the problems away? Basically, after that, things would be a lot better?
Yeah, for sure. If you talk about a 3 kilometer of a cable, this is 88. But you should also be mindful that we have laid down the 11 kV cables just for, we serve them as interconnectors, meaning they serve as a redundancy in case the main feed, which is the 88 cable, fails. But they're not meant to permanently do that. They are just there as a temporary solution. So what is needed is the 88 kV cable. And there's a new technology, which is the XLPE one. It's 88 kV oil, and not oil rather, 88 kV cable, which we are in the process. As things stand, we have ordered it from the manufacturers. Then we'll be laying it on the ground from Observatory substation to Bellevue substation. This will bring in stability. And while we try also to bring in the new control board, and also to make sure that when all that comes, our transformers are able to communicate further with this control system when we refurbish the entire station. But as things stand, it's temporary measures that are there. So these things will run parallel. And we also inform the community as we finish up on one phase, the other, and when the equipment arrives in the country as well, or from the manufacturers that will be sourcing them, we'll be able to indicate to say this is the situation and this is how we are moving about it.
I mean, you've got a 66-year-old cable. You've got huge issues in Joburg. I mean, there must be other places where this can happen. So other areas are vulnerable too. And then you're stuck with the same problem. Are you able to sort of do maintenance to stop you relying on a cable that's so old? And I know, Charles, you've got budget issues and all sorts of other issues. But are you able to go to some of those parts of Joburg and make sure we're not relying on cables that are, so ancient?
Of course. That is the strategy in place. So some of these projects, the CAPEX projects that we'll be doing is to, effectively, remove those cables before they can even fail. And we have started, but unfortunately, this one failed. And when it has failed like this, it's a cable that you have to run it when it's live. You can't say I'm exposing it to or dig it and you maintain it. You can't maintain this cable. In a sense that because it only runs, and when it fails, you then identify where the problem is. Then you dug or you trench, and then you then pick up and then repair where the problem is. Because it's not the entire cable that is having problems. It's pockets of these spots where it is failing. And when it fails like that, it therefore warrants you to respond. But yes, it's a very old cable. And as things stand, I was not even born by then. So it's something that we are going to resolve it as we move along. But we are targeting the entire city. Thanks.
Me too, yeah. Charles Klowana wasn't born either. Thanks very much indeed. Group Executive for Service Delivery Centres and Maintenance at City Power. All right, lots to come in the next little while. We'll talk about homelessness, those people removed from the tennis courts in Cape Town in the next little while. Still struck, by the way. Can I just go back for a minute? A cable that's 66 years old. Wow, just incredible. You with SFM leading the conversation, 8 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thanks, Stephen. The top stories this hour: the DA's KZN Premier candidate speaks out, and the ANC sends condolences to the families of the bus crash victims. A very good morning to you. We start with election news. The DA's KZN Premier candidate Chris Pappas says he would focus on cutting the bloated boards of state entities to make money available for basic service delivery should he be elected to lead the province. The general elections take place on May the 29th. Pappas says The party wants to prioritize getting basic services to work for the people. This includes access to water and fixing roads. Papas and the DA's provincial leader, Francois Rogers, spoke to the media in Durban. The DA premier candidate says that he'll also hold civil servants accountable.
The fourth is skills and lifestyle audits. We know that people are enjoying themselves off of public benefit, and this has to change. And I'm sure once we announce the lifestyle and skills audit, like we saw in Mgeni, a number of people will conveniently leave because they know what's next. Just by the way, 8 senior managers have left Mgeni because of consequence management and skills-related issues.
The ANC in Mpumalanga has sent its condolences to the families of their members who were killed in a bus crash on the R33 between Vryheid and Paul Petersburg in KZN. The members were returning from the ANC rally held at the Moses Mabhida Stadium in eThekwini on Saturday. At least 9 members died in the bus crash and several others were admitted to hospital. Provincial ANC Secretary Muzi Chirwa says the members are from Mpuluzi in the Gertsibande region.
We learned that some were taken to the hospitals, however several were also passed on. So we're in the process of engaging the families and arranging the transport of those who are released from the clinic and the hospital.
The sewer spill that has ravaged Broad Bray Road in Sweden and Ramosadi villages in Mahikeng in the northwest may take the next 12 months to fix. The spill happened in August last year after the pipes burst. The repair of the pipes is underway, but the unbearable stench is making the daily life of the locals very difficult.
The smell has led to many of the elderly and children going in and out of hospitals. We are not sure whether it's best to open the windows or to keep them closed.
I feel like our constitutional rights have been infringed. Section 10 of the Constitution is the right to human dignity. It means that we don't have a dignity here.
We didn't even know that there were pipes here. We only hear it now when there's a problem of pipes.
During the delivery of his State of the Province address, the acting Northwest Premier Nuno Maloyi acknowledged that the residents have been exposed to inhumane conditions. He said they've sought intervention, but it'll not be a quick fix solution.
The communities of Ramosadi and Siweding in Mahikeng have for the past few months been subjected to inhuman sewer spillages in their household and their locality. We have now intervened. We have spoken to the district. The contractor is back on site. The entire project will be funded by the Ngagamudiri Mulema district, and that challenge will be addressed within the next 12 months.
And the Afghanistan Journalist Center, the AFJC, says the Taliban authorities in the southeastern Khost province have banned girls from making phone calls to radio stations and to TV stations. More from the BBC's Anbarasan Etirajan.
The Afghan Journalists Organization said in a letter sent to media outlets, a local Taliban police chief had warned that some private radio stations were promoting moral corruption by broadcasting school lessons or social programs involving girls. The letter said that media officials would be summoned or prosecuted if they allowed girls to take part in the programs.
The top story at 8 o'clock, the DA's KZN Premier candidate Chris Papas says he would focus on cutting the bloated boards of state entities to make money available for basic service delivery should he be elected to lead the province. For SAFM News, Kimudupi Makhalemel.
A very good morning to you in your SFM Sports Headlines Soccer. Mamelodi Sundowns, they've booked another Champions League quarterfinal spot that their focus now is on Amazulu, and the Banyana goalkeeper Antile Dlamini sheds light on the obstacles South African goalkeepers encounter in pursuing opportunities overseas. All this and more just before 8:30.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Stays heavy out of Soweto towards Randburg this morning with a bike crash just after Bayers Nordia Drive. The backlog of traffic back to almost sort of Maresburg territory, certainly from Main Reef Road Bridge. It all jams quite heavily until that crash scene just after Bayers Nordia. Collision on the N3 North at Heldenay, so traffic out of the Alberton and Germiston areas remains heavily back this morning. Durban, if you're leaving town, heading out towards Pinetown or Pietermaritzburg, there's a big queue to work through from Spaghetti Junction all the way to Paradise Valley. It's a combination of roadworks and the earlier truck fire that we've been talking about. You've really got to sort of get to the M13 split to get out of that, and that's keeping some extra pressure behind it on the N2 both ways onto the N3 at 4 level, and it's forcing a lot of traffic onto the M13 from Sherwood, and of course over the roadworks at the N2 bridge towards Westville. So there's some real proper backlogging going on in that part of Durban this morning. Cape Town, the southern suburbs are very heavy. Rosebank, Rondebosch, Newlands, Claremont, a lot of traffic, school traffic, and of course you've got UCT there, so M3 from Constantia up towards the UCT exit stays really busy, and we're still queuing heavily on all the approaches into Stellenbosch this morning. R44 arriving from Paarl and the R44 arriving up from Somerset West are the two heaviest approaches. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
SAFM Sunrise. A vivid start to your day.
7 minutes after 8, good morning, you're with SAFM Sunrise. I'm Stephen Grootes, glad you're with us this morning. Well, lots to come, of course. We'll talk about electric cars. We'll talk about the hacking of spy satellites. How scary is that? Well, not even spy satellites. I mean, I don't know if you realize how important satellites have become. You might use them to watch TV, to move anywhere. GPS, you're using satellites. Probably when you send someone a WhatsApp, there's a chance it's going through a satellite. I mean, it might not be, but it might be. And so, yeah, very scary to sort of see what happens if satellites are now being hacked. And everyone talks about using, getting internet access from this person or that person using satellites. So very scary if that's what happens. You know how important the internet is to us. And then we'll also talk about homeless people. We sort of touched on it a bit last week. People had moved into the area on tennis courts in Cape Town. And now they've been removed. Is that the right thing to do or not? It's very complicated. There's a lot of issues that come out around it, I realize. And we know more and more people moving into cities, into urban areas, looking for jobs, looking for a place to live. Very, very desperate, actually. So very difficult for them. You know, the number 086 000 2032. You heard that conversation around violence in schools. The issue of corporal punishment seems to be coming up again. We heard that issue about the ANC and their election manifesto. Spoke also about the situation around the Judge Morta, I should say, who basically told the lawyers before him that he was unhappy that all of them were white. It's a very interesting case. You heard Bond and Yorker's view on that as well. 9 minutes after 8. Good morning.
At SFM Radio and at Stephen Grootes on Twitter.
Lots of views coming in around the ANC and their election manifesto. Pumzile in Humansdorp represents the ANC as a councillor there. Pumzile, hi, were you pleased with your manifesto?
Greetings, Sachi, and the listeners. As Chief, first I want to convey my condolences to the 9 ANC supporters that perished in that bus accident. We cry with the family and the organization. Equally, I want to express my excitement and for the successful manifesto rally at Moses Mabhida. I am definitely sure our critics, in fact, are not getting chest pains because many of them, I know for a fact, they were actually wishing for the failure and non-attendance or poor attendance, so to speak. The manifesto itself is a real manifesto. It's a manifesto that has got deliverables to the masses of the people of this country. As has always been the case, the ANC has been proving itself to change the lives of our people. However, it is the only organization that does not actually hide behind its own failures. We admit that there are actually shortcomings, and through those, we'll be able to improve as we move forward.
Okay, so Pumzile, and I mean, I think this is going to be an important point in the election. I put it to Minister Kubai. Yes. You believe then that people who are implicated in corruption, not necessarily charged, implicated, won't be representing the party on the lists?
No, that is a matter. I think she has eloquently responded into that question, which I would not like really to repeat. My response maybe might dilute the good response that she has actually.
Let me put it to you like this. Do you mind, Phumzile? Do you think that voters can judge the ANC on that candidate list?
No, I don't think so. The ANC is capable to deal with the list itself, and you must remember, that list is generated, in fact, from branches of the ANC, and even people have participated in actually developing that list. So I don't think, and if there is anyone that does not go through the eye of the needle, then that will be actually good for the organization and that disciplined cadre to say, no, I won't be making it through the eye of the needle. So it's a matter of being honest. Even if Phumzile, for instance, is implicated on serious matters, definitely Phumzile cannot allow his own behavior and conduct to negatively impact on the organization. Phumzile must withdraw and let the ANC actually go forward with the good work.
All right, Phumzile and Humansdorp, thank you. Just a reminder, he does represent the ANC as a councillor. Peter in Durban, hi. The issue of Judge Morta, what he said to these advocates in front of him, and he said he's not happy that all of them are white. What do you think?
Thanks, Stephen. Well, look, I'm an attorney, Stephen. I've been for over 30 years. And my concern is that justice has to be seen to be done. If I'm sitting in court with a client and that comment is made, can I really believe I can get a completely objective judgment from that judge? Doesn't it cast some doubt? I mean, this is my concern. One of your callers talked about comments being made in chambers. I agree. It might be a better place to do it, but in open court, Stephen, I've got a problem. I can tell you that in KZN, where I operate, where I practice, virtually all legal representatives that I've come across for the state or province or even city are not white lawyers. So I don't really experience that here, but I do have a concern about it, Stephen. I'm not sure it's appropriate, and I just think that the judge is placing himself or herself in a position of subjectivity which is not appropriate in the courtroom.
Do you think, Peter, and I mean, this may be unfair to ask, but I mean, would there be a basis for a judge to be asked to recuse themselves if they made a comment like this? And this sort of opens a hornet's nest. If one side asks him to recuse himself and the other side says he mustn't recuse himself, then it gets very sticky.
Even the point is the judge shouldn't put himself or herself in that difficult situation in the first place. But recusal is an option. The other thing, of course, is on appeal. I could use that as a ground to say, well, this was a biased judgment based on comments made which are on record. Everything's recorded. It's all there. It's not a good idea, Stephen. I mean, it's not an unfounded comment. I mean, I've seen it myself, and I've asked the question myself. But the reality is that you're getting off on the wrong foot when you do that.
All right, Peter in Durban, thank you. It's a fascinating case that we're looking at here. And, of course, you've heard some strong support from the Black Lawyers Association for Judge Morta. It's 14 minutes after 8.
First in the morning, SAFM Sunrise with Stephen Grootes.
Well, last week there was confirmation that a large group of people who had built shacks and dwellings on tennis courts in Sea Point in Cape Town, in Greenpoint, in the city centre, they've now been removed by the city. The city had won a court order which said that they could be removed. They had also been offered alternative accommodation. As I understand it, not every single person living there took up that alternative accommodation, but this is the situation now. They have now been removed. As well, of course, Cape Town, like other cities, has huge problems in managing these dynamics. Many people moving in absolutely desperate, looking for a place to live. On the other hand, you could argue, I think perhaps quite strongly, that tennis courts or a park are designed to be used as a park or as a tennis court. Jean-Ray Knightenfit is the Chief Executive Officer at U-Turn Homeless Ministries. Jean-Ray, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning, Stephen. Thank you. Yes, lovely to be here.
Do you believe the city did the right thing by moving these people?
It's a tricky question. Let me say that. I think I've been asked, do you support the evictions as U-Turn? Overall, I would say no, we don't support the evictions as U-Turn. But what we do support is the city's mandate to keep the parks and the public spaces and the streets clean and free of crime and safe for citizens, obviously. So the city's obviously in a very difficult position. I think the big question is this the best way to do it? Is this the most productive way to actually get people off the street?
So, I mean...
And certainly from our...
go on. From your point of view?
From our perspective, what we see this every day, is you move people from one area, it costs a huge amount of money, and they just land up in another area. So they become somebody else's problem. And then you move them from there, and sometimes they go back to where they started from. So unless there's a proper rehabilitative process going on that they can access, they're going to just keep being moved from place to place to place. And that costs a lot of taxpayer money to do it. So I think the mayor has and the city has tried really hard to increase shelter beds and these kinds of things. And I mean, we really do applaud them for that. I think they are in a difficult position. But the reality is they can't provide 20,000 shelter beds. There needs to be a more comprehensive way of looking at it.
So, when people go to a shelter bed, what happens to them after that? I mean, they can't spend the rest of their lives there. And I know this has been a big issue. It's a big issue around the world. Sometimes people have rules. For example, you can only sleep there. You can't be there during the day. I think some of those rules are quite controversial. So you need a process of rehabilitation. Someone who's been living on the street for a year, very difficult life. Often people sometimes tell me that's associated with issues around substance abuse, for example. I don't know if that's true, but it might be. You see, you've got a sort of deep-seated rehabilitation you have to undertake.
Yeah, absolutely. In Cape Town, certainly, the vast majority are addicted to substances. Over 70% of people will outright tell you they are, but as you get to know the other 30%, you find that they are too. It's very linked to the gang culture and the drug culture of Cape Flats. And most people have come through the prison system. There's just very, very high rates of addiction. You have to deal with the addiction, but you have to deal with more than the addiction, because there are things that landed them on the streets beyond the addiction. There's often mental health issues. There's often sort of other psychosocial issues, anger management issues that perhaps you've never ever worked, you have no experience in working. So we focus, as U-Turn, we focus very intensely on a process which tracks or gets you financially independent, so employable and employed, which deals with the substance addiction, which deals with rebuilding your support networks with your community and your family, etc., so that you can actually function supportedly, etc. And that is quite a long process, but we do have over 90% success rate of those who complete it and move out into the open labor market in terms of long-term employment, etc. And we certainly push that. We're pushing it to the city to say, put your money there, because as you say, if you put people into shelter beds, you just need more and more and more shelter beds. And we have at least 14,000 people on the streets of Cape Town. If we went into a proper rehabilitation process and the kind of turnover that we have and the time it takes with existing shelter infrastructure, using that, but putting in proper rehabilitative processes, we could get everybody on the street through a rehabilitative process in the next 3 to 4 years. Whereas if you just build more and more and more shelter beds, you're just going to keep building more and more, because, as you say, people are stuck there.
It's a huge investment you need to look at.
It is very expensive, and even more than the actual creation of the space is the money it takes to maintain places like that.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Very interesting to see how this is developing. Jean-Ray Knighton-Fitz, the Chief Executive Officer at U-Turn Homeless Ministries, 20 minutes after 8.
Catch the Insider SA this Monday evening at 6 as international dance sensation Musa Mota fires the imagination of millions. Film star Zandile Mhlangu brings the action off-screen as much as on. And of all the wedding venues in the world, why did Dr. Carly Andringa and Paul van Dyk choose Antarctica? Find out on the Insider SA this Monday at 6. Repeat Saturday at 1 p.m. and Sunday morning at 10:30 on S3.
Diable Noir can't wait to demonstrate to Sekhukhune United that what they did to them in Limpopo will not prevail in Brazzaville. Meanwhile, Babina Nogo targets another victory against Yakati Yamama when they close the group stage curtain. This is the CAF Confederation Cup. Catch Diable Noir FC and Sekhukhune United FC on Sunday 3 March at 6 p.m. Live on SABC Sport on DTT Channel 4. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
The Science of Life on SAFM.
How often do you think you use a satellite? Now, I don't mean, you're looking up to see if that thing that's going over there at night is a satellite in the dark, or if you're actually, sending a message directly off a satellite. If you use GPS, probably if you use WhatsApp in some way, you might actually find that your signals are going through a satellite. So, it's a bit concerning then, when suddenly we find that satellites are vulnerable to things like hacking. Jan Vermeulen's the editor at My Broadband. Jan, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'd always thought a satellite would be quite difficult to sort of communicate with if it wasn't actually designed to communicate with you. How have they become more vulnerable to hacking?
It's really just got to do with attention. So they've become more complex, which increases the attack surface, is the industry technical term for that. So the more complexity is in a satellite, the more potential hooks there are for an attacker to potentially hack into. So that's one aspect. And the other aspect is that I think especially with the war in Ukraine, this has become an increasingly attractive target. And so all of a sudden, you've got people with time and expertise turning their attention to these things. Not that GPS wasn't an attractive target before, because a lot of military, well, the US military in particular, relied on GPS for a long time, and still does. And so those are critical systems to secure. But with communication satellites in particular, they were kind of left alone. It's like, this is a general good. We all benefit from this. Let's leave them alone. But in a time of war, that's all off the table.
It is quite something, because it doesn't just affect the United States. I mean, the way the internet works, it affects everybody. I mean, I want to say their entire families that would come to a halt without GPS, but their entire industries. I mean, the courier industry would just fall apart in a second if there was no GPS.
Yes, so mercifully, we're no longer dependent on just one GPS system. Europe has a GPS. So initially, we all used the American system, which was actually developed for the American military, and that's what we know as GPS today. But there's there's a European system, there's a Chinese system. So there's different GPS systems now. So there is some redundancy, but I mean, obviously, those systems are costly and time-consuming to put into space. They're generally under some kind of government control. They're not privately owned. And also many devices still only rely on one network or the other. So if one of those networks is disrupted, it will cause a ripple effect. And so, for example, so much internet communication is reliant on accurate timestamps. Every bit of encryption that we do on the internet requires the user, and the server that you're communicating with to agree on what time it is. And the way we generally do that is via GPS. So if that goes down, basically the whole swaths of the internet will be disrupted, because we will not be able to communicate, to use the encrypted systems that we have come to rely on.
So, I mean, WhatsApp would possibly fall over, or parts of it, or you wouldn't know, some messages would arrive late, or you wouldn't know if they were encrypted or not, things like that.
Yes, exactly. So we don't quite know the full ramifications of what such an attack would be. It would probably just stop working. So if a system like WhatsApp is entirely reliant on GPS, the American system, then if it goes offline, then the message it would just throw an error. It would say, it would be like there's been a problem in transmitting this message, and so the whole network grinds to a halt. That's the most likely and probably the best outcome in a scenario like that. You definitely do not want the encryption to just degrade, so that messages are sent unencrypted. That would be the worst outcome.
I suppose the fact is that if there is a sort of time of war or time of tension between the countries that are capable of doing this, there's just no way you can protect satellites. Yes, you can, everyone will say they protect their satellites, but I know other satellites have been hacked in the past. And so sometimes someone is going to absolutely do it, and that's how it's going to be.
Yes. Basically, the protection mechanisms, a lot of the protection mechanisms have to be put in place before they're sent into space. So there's some stuff that we can do in software, but if you don't have the necessary hardware, up in space that can make these systems, resilient against attacks, then they are sitting ripe for the picking. And everything from taking over a satellite and then using some of the satellites in orbit are maneuverable still. They have some fuel to allow them to maneuver, and so you can imagine that you might just send them off course. You might send them coming crashing back down to Earth, which they'll probably burn up in the atmosphere, but that would mean the satellite gets taken out of commission permanently, or you can send them off course and crash them into another satellite, which could cause huge problems. So, the potential for attack here, I think, is concerning, which is why there's some renewed interest in this, because this is something that hasn't really been done before, and the potential ramifications are enormous.
Thank you very much indeed, Jan Vermeulen, editor at My Broadband. Really appreciate the time. 27 after 8.
This is SAFM Sport with Zai Khan.
Zai, good morning. So, Chiefs on the one side, Sundowns on the other.
There we go. Masandawana walking away with a massive 3 points. Their head coach, Rulani Mokoena, well, he couldn't contain his joy after the club sealed qualification for the CAF Champions League knockout stages. The Brazilians qualified alongside Group A leaders Tipe Mazembe with one match left to play after dispatching Mauritanian club Nouadhibou away in difficult conditions. Here's Mokoena.
We expected a tough game. We trained on the pitch, so we could see the conditions would not be the best because we don't play on AstroTurf in South Africa. And the humidity, the dry air is not easy. And that's why you are so strong at home. Some very good results against Pyramids and Mazembe. So the 4 points that Nouadhibou has in the group stages were 4 points picked up at home.
Now, other clubs to qualify for the quarterfinals are Egyptian giants Al Ahly, the 1998 winners of the competition, ASEC Mimosa from Ivory Coast, and Tanzania's Young Africans, who made it this far for the first time in their history. Sundowns, meanwhile, will turn their attention to the midweek DStv Premiership match against Amazulu. Now, SuperSport United's hopes of reaching the CAF Confed Cup knockout stages ended after their 1-1 draw against Modern Future at Peter Mokaba Stadium. The result sees United in third position in Group A with 4 points from 5 matches, while the Egyptian side are in second position and a foot in the knockout stage with 9 points from the number of games. SuperSport still have a last group match away at USM Alger next month, and even if they win that encounter, they can only reach 7 points and won't progress. Now, Banyana and Mamelodi Sundowns goalkeeper Andile Dlamini sheds light on obstacles South African goalkeepers encounter in pursuing opportunities overseas. Now, despite a surge in local players venturing abroad, goalkeepers find it difficult and challenging to make the leap into other countries. She's observed a trend where countries prioritize their own goalkeepers rather than importing established ones. Let's go to tennis action. Australian Jordan Thompson completed his fairy tale run at the Los Cabos Open with a 6-3, 7-6 win over the Norwegian Casper Ruud. And Jasmine Paoli, she had a gritty comeback victory to win 4-6, 7-5, 7-5 and take the Dubai Duty Free Tennis Championship final. And finally, golf. The Dutch golfer Darius van Driel carded a final round of 67 to claim a first career win on the DP World Tour with a score of 14 under par and a 2-shot victory at the Kenya Open played at the Mutega Golf Club in Nairobi. Spaniard Nacho Elvira finished tied second on 12 under par after carding a 66 level with England's Joe Dean, who managed a 67. More sport for you comes at SFM next at around 12:30. I'm Zai Khan.
Zai, thanks very much indeed. Changes in our car industry, that's next. You're with SFM leading the conversation, 8:30.
A very good morning with the news headlines. Ke Modupi Makgalemele. Healthcare activist Dr. Khosile Tlabe has accused the government of forging ahead with the national health insurance as a means to open another avenue of misappropriating funds. The DA's KZN Premier candidate Chris Papa says he will focus on cutting the bloated boards of state entities to make money available for basic service delivery should he be elected to lead the province. And local authorities in Washington say a serving member of the military set himself on fire outside the Israeli embassy in the U.S. capital. And those are your headlines. A full news update at 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
Still very slow on the N1 South coming through from Pretoria to Joburg this morning. The latest is a crash just around the old Joburg Road exit, so traffic remaining backed up from Brockfontein interchange. This bike crash on the N1 North after Beyers-Nordeel, still queuing traffic from Gordon Road territory. So you're leaving Soweto, you sort of get into Rudaport and you stay in some very heavy traffic up through 14, through Beyers-Nordeel and up towards that crash scene. The Mike 1 North from Gold Reef City up through Double Decker remains heavy as well. Durban, the breakdown, the stationary truck that was on fire earlier, up by the Paradise Valley split into Pinetown. That's been cleared, so that traffic backlog that was queuing all morning from Spaghetti Junction out towards Pinetown has eased up. It has, I think, forced a lot of traffic off the N3 onto the M13, which is jammed heavily from Sherwood out to the roadworks at the N2 bridge. Bel Air Road being worked on near Chief Albert Lutuli Hospital, so some delays to and from the M7 highway there. And if you're around Cape Town, still very busy on the M3. There's queues this morning from Constantia up through Bishop's Court, and then you just stay in traffic right through towards the UCT exit. A little bit of traffic jamming through Rosebank areas and Rondebosch, Claremont and Newlands. It is starting to ease up, but it's been busy. And the N7 North stays heavy for this time of morning, which is a little bit unusual, queuing up from Goodwood up towards the Bosman-Stam Road exit. And some roadworks on Marine Drive near Lagoon Beach, not Lagoon Beach, near Woodbridge Island. So Marine Drive coming past the high school in towards that Milnerton area is unusually slow. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Bafana Style remember what transpired in Lubumbashi when they went down by a goal to nil against the Ravens. They want to ensure their visitors walk away with sad faces when they meet in the final group stage contest. However, the DRC outfit are confident of another upset. This is the CAF Champions League. Catch Mamelodi Sundowns versus TP Mazembe on Saturday 2 March at 2:30 p.m. live on SABC1. Also available on SABC Plus and SABCSport.com. Hashtag We Love It Here. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
Attention listeners, do you know a young visionary making a difference in South Africa? Sunday World is searching for unsung heroes, from community leaders to tech innovators. We're looking for the young minds driving positive change. Nominate someone who's making waves in education, science, tourism or any field. Let's recognize and celebrate their contributions together. Nominate your unsung hero now, because every hero deserves their moment in the spotlight. Hashtag unsung heroes, hashtag nominate now, hashtag Sunday World. sundayworld.co.za/heroes-nomination-2024.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
26 minutes to 9 the time. Last week, the Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, announced a new policy that will see government incentivizing car manufacturers to invest in building cars powered by electricity and by green hydrogen. Under the plan, government will actually offer 150% of the cost of investments by the industry into plants that will build these vehicles. Of course, for us, these cars are a huge export market. They employ thousands of people in Tshwane and the Eastern Cape. Just last week, you heard from Transnet Central Region Port Manager, who deals with the ports in Joburg and East London, about how they're investing in more capacity there to export these cars. At the same time, the main producer of electric cars in the world at the moment is China. The European Union has accused the Chinese government of providing export subsidies to manufacturers there. In other words, if you buy an electric car built in China, part of the cost that you would normally pay has been paid for by the Chinese government. In other words, if we're going to compete with China, our government might have to follow the same kind of policy. I suppose in a way it already is. So then, what is the outlook for our car industry and for the car that you will buy next? Mikhail Mabasa is the CEO at the National Association of Automobile Manufacturers, also, of course, a transport economist. Then Greg Marozewski is the managing director for Volvo Cars South Africa. We'll ask them, as one of the companies selling electric cars in the space, how much demand there is. And then Nico Vermeulen is the motoring contributor at Jet Set Breakfast on weekend. Nico Smit, my apologies, is the motoring contributor for Jet Set Breakfast. We've begged and borrowed him from Michelle for the morning. We start then with the CEO at NAMSA, Michael Mabasa. Mr. Mabasa, good morning and thanks for your time.
Stephen, thank you very much for having me.
So now you have a plan from the finance minister. There's a sort of, I suppose, a roadmap to how all of this is going to work. What impact is this going to have on your industry? Is government going far enough?
Well, look, Stephen, I think it's a good step. It's a first good step forward because you'd remember that the South African government has delayed relative to what's happening globally in terms of these measures that different governments have been taking. South Africa is obviously the 22nd biggest manufacturer of vehicles globally. And we know that many of the other markets that are manufacturing vehicles around the world have introduced measures. You've mentioned China. If you look at Europe and you look at the United States and many other markets that are also producing these vehicles, you clearly see that government support has absolutely been very, very advanced, and South Africa has obviously lagged behind. But I think the Minister of Finance has obviously given us a fantastic news, and it's a first step towards the right direction, because certainly the evolution of new energy vehicles is definitely taking shape around the world, and we've seen in certain markets where the buying and the manufacturing of new energy vehicles has actually also surpassed those of the traditional internal combustion engines. So the future is changing, and it's changing very, very rapidly around the world.
Are we falling behind? Are we moving too slowly?
Well, at least we are moving. We have absolutely in the last 5 years moving exceptionally very slow, because you'd recall, Stephen, that the South African policy on new energy vehicles was also not in place. The government only announced the white paper on new energy vehicles, particularly the production of these vehicles, on the 4th of December in 2023. And now the Minister of Finance has now also indicated the type of fiscal support the government is going to be putting in place from March 2026 in order to be able to stimulate particularly the production of these vehicles. Because if you look at the South African manufacturing landscape, in 2022 and 2023, more than 60% of the vehicles that we are producing in South Africa today are actually not sold in this country. So we're selling vehicles to 152 different markets around the world. And many of these markets where our vehicles are going into, those markets have obviously have taken a decision to ban internal combustion engines, which means effectively, if we do not start manufacturing new energy vehicles sooner rather than later, our capacity to be able to continue to export these vehicles into those markets will be constrained.
The amount of money that government is going to spend, so this is the 150% investment. I mean, it looks generous. I mean, for every rand, basically, that someone's going to spend on producing these facilities and building these facilities, you get sort of R1.50 back. So obviously that's a big subsidy. But this is going to require a huge change. Do you think it's going to be enough? It's also only starting in 2026.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think currently in South Africa, Stephen, we've got 7 manufacturers who are currently manufacturing passenger vehicles. We know that 2 more are already setting up shop in the country. So by the time we get to 2026, we'll have 9 manufacturers in South Africa. We also know that there's 2 more that are currently doing the environmental studies in the country, so that they can also be able to produce these vehicles in South Africa. So the South African market is actually a very attractive vehicle manufacturing ecosystem. And the fact that we are able to attract even new investors, notwithstanding the many challenges that we have in relation to load shedding, ports and infrastructure, logistics, and so on and so forth, the fact that we still have manufacturers that are finding their way to South Africa is really a vote of confidence in our capacity to be able to continue to maintain this investment. So this 150% that government has put in place is absolutely a very good start. Obviously, everything depends on demand. So the more vehicles we're able to produce, and certainly we'll certainly be able to continue to engage with government, because that door is not closed. Engagements will continue, and once the demand picks up, and I'm sure that we can be able to further engage with government in terms of how we can be able to make those, that investment a lot sweeter than it is currently.
We see China as subsidizing its own industry. Well, let me rephrase that. The European Union and I think the United States have accused China of subsidizing its own industry. What impact does that have on us? I mean, our government, as much as I love it, can't compete with China's.
Certainly not. I think, the Chinese government has deep pockets on this one, because they're not only subsidizing the manufacturing of vehicles, they're also subsidizing, stimulating demand. So you and I, as consumers of these vehicles, government has put in place a government subsidy so that they can be able to stimulate demand. In South Africa currently, what the Minister of Finance announced last week is only subsidies that will go only towards the manufacturing part of the of the subsidy, not necessarily stimulating the demand, where South Africans will be encouraged to go and buy these vehicles, because as I indicated earlier on, the government strategy for now is export-led, and they're saying they don't want to lose the export value, because we get a lot of export earnings as a country when we send these vehicles out of the country. So, the benefit to the country is also massive, because there's money that is coming into the fiscus as a result of the export earnings that we are getting. So we can't compete with China, but certainly I think we've done what we needed to do as a first step. And certainly we hope to continue to engage with government so that we can see how best we can also be able to stimulate demand, because we really also want to see the price of these vehicles coming down, so that many South Africans can also begin to afford to buy these cars.
Mikhail, there's a lot going on here. So you've got electric cars, in other words, you plug it in to charge it. You've got hybrid cars, so these are cars that sometimes have a petrol engine, but they also power themselves from braking, so the obvious example is the Prius. And then you've got a green hydrogen, which I know has been rolled out in Germany and in other places. From what I can see, you'll know it better than I do, our government is really pushing hard electric cars you plug in. Is that a better choice than subsidizing sort of hybrid, the production of hybrids?
Well, I think that's an ongoing conversation that we are having amongst ourselves, because our view, particularly as the automotive industry, is that there are a number of different technologies that are available in the market that obviously encourages the movement towards decarbonization, and where we can be able to reduce carbon footprint and carbon emissions in our environment, because I think that's the ultimate goal at the end of the day. So, and there are different drivetrains that the industry has put in place, and in the South African context, we don't think that it is in our best interest as a country to only focus on one solution at the expense of the others. So we believe very strongly that the country has the ability to be able to bring in a number of other technologies as well. Plug-in traditional, hybrids, plug-in hybrids, hydrogen, fuel cells, and then of course battery electric. And there's absolutely, the ability for the country to be able to embrace those technologies, because we also believe, Stephen, that the South African market is not going to move as fast as other markets in China, in Europe, in relation to adoption of pure battery electric. We think that hybrid solutions are also a fantastic transition to be able to socialize this new technology, because we still have issues around range anxiety, where people are not sure, and because of the vastness of the country in terms of travel distance, when a person is moving from Musina to Cape Town, you also still want to give people that level of comfort that they can be able to do that trip with a battery in the car and also with a fuel tank, so that they can really be able to make sure that they are socializing to this new technology, and over time they can then be able to be comfortable that the battery would be the best option for them.
Mikhail Mabasa, thank you. The CEO of the National Association of Automobile Manufacturers of South Africa. Really appreciate the time. 8:45, the time. Continuing your mediated conversation, the latest in the year transition in terms of how cars are moving from those announcements by the Finance Minister last week. Let's speak now to the Managing Director for Volvo Cars South Africa, Greg Marozewski. Greg, good morning. Thanks for your time.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
You're competing in the electric car market with other big brands. Is this segment of the market growing in South Africa? Are you seeing growth?
We are. The segment is very small at the moment, but it is growing at quite a rapid pace. So we think over the next couple of years that expansion will take place, especially as new models have become available.
Different people in different markets do different things, and Mikhail Mabasa sort of pointed to this. In Tokyo, you would need a very small car to go from place to place. In South Africa, your car, in a city even, really needs to go a lot further. Is there a different type of demand for cars here that might actually mean that the process of adopting electric cars, if that's the way we go, takes a lot longer than it does in other places?
I think to some extent that's true, but I think also that depending on what your needs are, there are different offers available in terms of electric cars. And then if you're looking at longer distances, most of the distances covered on a Monday to Friday basis are fairly short anyway, which most electric cars will take you there. So I think it's more about the idea of adopting to EVs rather than the actual product not being suitable.
It's also about, sort of preparing for it. In other words, we don't have electric car charging stations in many places. You have them in shopping centres and posh areas, but you probably don't have them in every small dorp in the Northern Cape.
No, and that is changing, that's true. But you'll find them already along the major highways. So from Johannesburg to Durban, it's covered. From Johannesburg to Cape Town, it's covered. The Garden Route's covered. And I think that will expand as the demand picks up for the cars. And as we sell more cars, there will be more infrastructure rolled out.
Can electric cars do the same thing that people are used to their petrol cars doing? I mean, can a normal electric car tow a trailer from Joburg to the coast, for example? You'd expect your petrol car to do that. Yes, you would stop in Harrismith or whatever to fuel it up. So, with a fast car charging station, you can do that. But would a normal electric car be able to tow a trailer? Would it have the same amount? I don't even know what the right word is. Torque?
I think from a torque and a performance point of view, it's definitely there. And as with a petrol or diesel car, the heavier the trailer, your fuel consumption will go up. So on the electric car, your kilowatt hours for 100 kilometers will go up. But certainly you can do that, and then you just have to stop extra one time to charge it up.
The economics of it. So when you buy an electric car, that upfront cost is still quite high. But once you run it, depending on how you actually charge it, do we know what the economics are in terms of comparing the cost of running that car compared to the cost of running petrol? I'm really looking at the cost of electricity, depending on how you get it, to the cost of petrol.
Yeah, so I think how you get electricity is the main one. So if you buy from Eskom at your house, I think the calculation is roughly a third to a quarter of the price of petrol. Obviously, if you generate electricity from solar, that will be almost zero, except for obviously the initial investment. And then if you fill up along the fast charging stations along the routes, then that will become a little more expensive.
Okay. Is there a lot of room for growth? I mean, even with load shedding, if load shedding ended, would that make a big difference, do you think? There's a sort of something would click in our heads that would mean that there would suddenly be a lot more demand for electric cars?
I think that load shedding would, if it ended, it would change the perception to a large extent. I think if you speak to the people who drive electric cars, load shedding is not an issue. You plug the car in at night in the garage, and the next morning it's charged. And very seldom do you charge it from empty to full. As I said, if you do 100 kilometers per day, that will take a couple of hours to charge. So load shedding, I think, is just a discussion point for the people who don't have experience with EVs. But I don't think it's a real issue for us.
Greg Marozewski, thanks very much indeed. Managing Director of Volvo Cars South Africa. Do appreciate the time. In a moment, we'll hear from Nico Smit. 11 minutes now to 9.
SAFM, guiding you through the rush hour traffic.
It's been a busy run out of Soweto through to Randburg with this bike crash from much earlier this morning, just after Beyers Nordier Drive. It's about halfway between Beyers Nordier and Malabong, where the traffic remains heavy from 14th Avenue. And behind that, there's quite a delay on Beyers Nordier coming from Lifestyle to try and work your way into that N1 to go north. The Mike 1 from Boyson's up into Crown stays busy. Bit of a backlog on the M2 as well, through from Joe Slovo into the Crown area. And the N3 is now just queuing up between Limbro Park and the Beclu interchange. Motorists driving out of Pretoria to Joburg, hoping for a clear run. Not the case this morning, unfortunately. A crash down by the old Joburg Road exit. Traffic stays busy from as far back as Brockfontein and Eski and Pathelli, as we've been warning, from Vanderhof into CBD territory. Pretoria stays very heavily delayed. Durban, the vehicle fire incident going out of Durban on the N3 at Paradise Valley, that's all being cleared up. That big backlog from Spaghetti Junction is all sort of normalised now, which is good. Cape Town's M3, still a lot of pressure there this Monday from Constantia through to UCT. Got to get sort of up and down Wynberg Hill and through Rhodes Drive and right up to sort of Princess Anne. And once you get past that, it eases nicely. A lot of pressure still on the N2 inbound from Langa through to Hospital Bend. The N1 still busy as well. Platycliffe Hill through to the CBD. Behind that, Kuberg Road and Marine Drive routes are both queuing. And the social roadworks on Marine Drive coming through towards Woodbridge Island, still causing delays from the Milnerton High School territory. Just a note, in the Eastern Cape, there's quite a heavy backlog of traffic heading into Mthatha this morning. It's the N2 going north, around about the Shell Ultra City area, so just south of Mthatha, but driving into Mthatha Central. Backlog and a half of slow-moving traffic. Rob Byrne, SAFM Traffic.
Attention all HPCSA registered practitioners. It is your responsibility to comply with CPD requirements. Non-compliance may result in suspension, writing a compulsory board examination, or other penalties imposed by the professional boards. The CPD program is ongoing and practitioners must immediately comply to remain registered with council. To view your CPD status, update contact details or perform other self-service functions, access the HPCSA online portal or visit www.hpcsa.co.za.
The Free State Provincial Government, under the leadership of Premier Mxolisi Dukwana, will host the much-anticipated Free State Investment Conference. The conference seeks to promote the province as an investment destination through showcasing strategic investment projects. Do join us on the 27th of February 2024 at the University of the Free State's main campus in Bloemfontein. The Free State Provincial Government, harnessing partnerships, stimulating growth and development through investment.
Mediated conversation on SAFM.
8 minutes to 9, the time. Continue mediated conversation here on SAFM about the transitions in the car industry after those announcements by the Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana last week. Nico Smit works in the motor industry, is also a motoring contributor for Jet Set Breakfast. Nico, good morning. I hope Michelle won't mind too much. Welcome to SAFM Sunrise.
Good morning, Stephen. I'm sure she will.
What we don't really see, and what I haven't seen, is second-hand electric cars. Is there a big resale market? I mean, do they last as long as petrol cars, and are they just too new to be being sold second-hand at this stage?
I think that's exactly the case. The first thing is there's not been many electric cars in the market. They haven't, they were recently introduced into South Africa, so you see them now and then. But simply, there's not a lot of cars in the market. That's why you don't really see a lot of them on the second-hand market.
It seems only a few electric car brands have entered our market, and I've seen predictions that there's going to be a large number of Chinese electric cars. Are you expecting those to come here?
Definitely. If you just look at what's happened in Europe, is they've really disrupted the market completely. The German manufacturers are very uncomfortable because of the pricing that these cars come in, which at the end of the day, for us as consumers, I think is fabulous, because if there's pressure on price, that brings the price down. So already you can see these companies like BYD or GWM that are bringing electric cars to the market. So there's already some Chinese brands. In Europe, that explosion is massive, and I think that's going to happen with us as well. Even just normal ICE, petrol diesel cars, you look at the amount of Chinese cars on the market. So it's a good thing if they put pressure on other manufacturers to lower the prices. So for us as consumers, I think it's fabulous.
Is load shedding a big issue for us? I was asking, the MD of Volvo a few moments ago about this, because it seems to me that one of the reasons people don't take electric cars seriously is simply because of load shedding. When you stop at this place, how would you know if it's actually going to work? Things like that. I know people are trying to create a sort of renewable energy car charging stations, a network of those across the country. I mean, that would be a good long-term investment, I imagine. But is load shedding a sort of symbolic problem for electric cars in a way? It just seems nonsense while we still have load shedding.
I think the biggest thing is, to me, normally it's almost the weakest excuse you can have when somebody says, load shedding is an issue, because I've driven quite a few different electric cars, and load shedding currently, on the stage that we're in, is a non-issue. I think the first thing we have to understand with electric cars is electric cars are not charged at charging stations. That's a small percentage of you living with an electric car. So there's literally millions of charging stations in South Africa, because every house is a charging station. So the first thing you need to understand is when you buy an electric car, you're never going to stop somewhere to charge it. It doesn't make sense for me to, I live in Pretoria, to go to a shopping center where the electricity is more expensive when it's very convenient just to plug it in at home. So if you have the proper setup, you can charge it overnight very quickly. And let's imagine you get home at 6 o'clock and you leave in the morning for work at 6 o'clock. That gives you 12 hours. And if you have 4 hours of load shedding, then there's still enough time to put energy into the vehicle. And most of us only drive a short distance, so you probably only have to charge it once a week. So it does depend on the driving. If you're a rep that does a lot of long distance driving, maybe currently it's not the ideal solution. So I hope that the investment isn't in the cities and in shopping centers, because that I think is actually not the right solution. The investment should be in infrastructure, long distance, because electric car in the city is so easy and so convenient. You just charge it at home all the time. And as I said, it really is not a non-event. But we need charging stations to go to Uppington. And also, once the volume of electric cars increases, then we're going to need more charging stations. It doesn't help you, but let's imagine 2 or 3 charging stations in Bloemfontein, and suddenly there's a lot more electric cars, and now everybody's queuing on the way to Cape Town. So regularly people are driving to Cape Town with their electric cars, but we need the infrastructure between the cities, not in the city. Don't waste your money putting up a charging station in a shopping center, because I'm charging my car at home, and the shopping center is it's going to be more expensive than electricity at home.
So the issue, I suppose, is range, right? And how long it takes to charge at home. And would I be able to charge it if I had a solar installation? Would I be able to charge it maybe for 6 hours during the day, or maybe 12 hours over a weekend? And that would probably get me to, say, Thursday, and then I only need to charge it overnight off Eskom once. I mean, those kinds of calculations. Is it possible to know how they're sort of panning out? Can people do it like that?
Yeah, I think forget about solar charging your car, except if you have a massive setup. If you've got a nice setup at home with solar, you might have a 5 kilowatt hour battery or a 10 kilowatt battery. Electric cars could go 50, 60, over 100 kilowatt hour battery. So if you have a massive setup, that could help you with your electric car. But for normal people, just the basic setup might help a little bit of energy into the car, but it's not going to make a massive difference into how far you can or how much energy you can put into the car. So currently, as I said, with Eskom, it's really an issue, but you need a big setup at home to be able to put enough energy into your battery. So it will help a little bit because energy is wasted from the sun, but you're not really going to make a big difference in how much energy goes into your car, with your basic setup.
Nico, I mean, it's interesting even if you just watch foreign films, you'll see some people driving around in electric cars. Are you expecting there to be a big change in our industry, in our society, or is this still going to take 20 years? Are we going to be maybe a little bit behind some other places?
My personal opinion is we're way behind. We're waiting way too long. If you look at other companies, how quickly they've adopted electric cars. So I think we're way behind. In Norway, at the end of the 80s, the band AHA actually started with a campaign to put pressure on the government. So they've already, since the 1990s, started looking at electric cars. And they incentivized the owners of electric cars. So if you buy an electric car, you can incentivize. So my personal opinion, we're behind. I think we're a bit slow with adoption. There are issues like long-distance driving. And I think we're not really going to stop making petrol-fueled cars. But it feels to me like we're way too slow to adopt compared to other markets. Yes, our market is different, but we can't, leave it too late.
Nico Smith, thank you. Really appreciate the time. Works in the motor industry, contributor as well, motoring contributor to Jet Set Breakfast. Thank you, Nico. Thank you, Michelle. My thanks also, of course, to Greg Marazuski, Managing Director at Volvo Cars South Africa, and starting us off today, Mikkel Mabasa, the CEO of the National Association of Automobile Manufacturers of South Africa. Well, thanks for being with us this morning. There's plenty to come through the day. I'm sure there'll be more conversations around the ANC election manifesto, more conversations to come as well about how your country and your world is changing. We will see you tomorrow. From Melissa, Ndu, Stanza, Zelma, myself, look after yourself. You're with SFM leading the conversation. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock.
Independent and impartial. This is SAFM News.
Thanks, Stephen. The top stories: a Sawa government accused of using the NHI to make money, and the DA's KZN Premier candidate speaks out. A very good morning to you. Healthcare activist Dr. Kgosi Letlape has accused the government of forging ahead with the national health insurance as a means to open another avenue of misappropriating funds. The NHI is touted as the country's universal health care plan, and it has received a boost with the National Treasury allocating 1.3 billion rand in its 2024 budget to fund its implementation. Letlape says the government has a responsibility to all South Africans in terms of health care.
NHI as proposed is going to be for those that are employed that are not on medicality being taxed. It's coming from the same parliament. Why can't they get their ducks in a row and understand that the responsibility is to all South Africans, not to create new nest eggs to eat from? This doesn't make sense. It defies logic. And if any one of us thinks what is being proposed is a reform, no, what is being proposed is a new fund to eat from.
A look at election news now. The DA's KZN Premier candidate Chris Pappas says he would focus on cutting the bloated boards of state entities to make money available for basic service delivery should he be elected to lead the province. The general elections take place on May the 29th. Pappas says the party wants to prioritize getting basic services to work for the people. This includes access to water and fixing roads. Pappas and the DA's provincial leader Francois Rogers spoke to the media in Durban. The DA Premier candidate says he'll also hold civil servants accountable.
The fourth is skills and lifestyle audits. We know that people are enjoying themselves off of public benefit, and this has to change. And I'm sure once we announce the lifestyle and skills audit, like we saw in Mgeni, a number of people will conveniently leave because they know what's next. Just by the way, 8 senior managers have left Mgeni because of consequence management and skills-related issues.
Section 27 is heading to the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein today to challenge the High Court in Pretoria's judgment instructing the Council of Educators to revise its mandatory sanctions policy, but it did not agree to fresh hearings. 2 teachers received what some believe to be lenient sanctions from the Council, despite corporal punishment being banned from schools since 1996. The punishment was based on the Council's internal policy called the Mandatory Sanctions Policy. Section 27 spokesperson Pearl Nicodemus says the High Court's judgment was too lenient and the matter should be sent back to the Council for reconsideration.
Section 27 is now appealing the High Court's judgment in the SCA to ensure that the 2 educators are subjected to fresh hearings, while SACE is cross-appealing the High Court's decision that its policy be revised. While it is important to ensure discipline in the classroom, the law relating to the corporal punishment ban must be respected. We encourage that teachers must be trained in alternative methods of discipline, and serious acts of violence by learners against teachers must be dealt with accordingly.
Section 27 says that the Council of Educators is cross-appealing the High Court in Pretoria's decision that its mandatory sanctions policy should be revised. The High Court instructed the Council to change its policy following the 2019 assault involving the 2 teachers. The Council held disciplinary hearings in September 2019 where both the teachers pleaded guilty to hitting 2 learners and were both fined 15,000 rand each, of which 5,000 was suspended. One of the learners allegedly experienced a lasting bleed from her ears, which required her to visit several doctors, resulting in her absenteeism from school and her repeating a grade. The sanctions also included striking the names of both teachers off the educator's roll, which was also suspended for 10 years. Section 27 says this means that these teachers are still teaching in the classrooms with no consideration for learners' safety. And authorities in Washington say a serving member of the military set himself on fire outside the Israeli embassy in the U.S. capital yesterday. The man is reported to be in a critical condition. The BBC's Warren Bull reports.
A spokeswoman for the U.S. Air Force confirmed that the incident involved an active duty airman,
but the authorities have so far declined to say whether it was a form of protest. It's not the first incident of self-immolation outside an Israeli diplomatic mission in the US since the conflict between Israel and Hamas erupted in October. In December, one person set themselves on fire in front of the Israeli consulate in the state of Georgia. On that occasion, remnants of a Palestinian flag were found at the scene, and police said it appeared to be an extreme act of political protest.
The top story at 9 o'clock, healthcare activist Dr. Khosile Tlape has accused the government of forging ahead with the national health insurance as a means to open another avenue of misappropriating funds. For SAFM News, Kemudupi Makhalemele.
Here, there, and everywhere. SAFM 105.1 FM in Johannesburg.
SAFM supports a litter-free South Africa. Play your part in keeping our surroundings and environment clean. SAFM, leading the conversation.
Eskom understands that electricity is an integral part of running a business. However, electricity demand is currently higher than supply, and energy efficiency is critical. Businesses are encouraged to reduce consumption between 7 a.m. and 6 p.m. by not leaving electrical equipment on standby mode, as well as turning off unnecessary lighting. We can reduce load shedding by working together. Every kilowatt counts.
Mzansi Africa.
Siyalobuga.
Siyabulela nangomso.
Thank you for witnessing the Africa Cup of Nations Côte d'Ivoire 2023 in your language of choice on SABC radio stations, digital platforms, and SABC TV channels.
Big ups to Hollywood Bets for being on board.
Your magnificent and heartwarming support gave millions of South Africans a spectacular and exhilarating experience during AFCON.
Asonye. Proudly brought to you by SABC Sport.
For the love of the game.
SAFM has signed a code of conduct that is enforced by the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Under the code, we are committed to giving news that is accurate, comment that is fair, and programming that is not harmful, does not amount to hate speech, or contain violence or explicit sex. If you think we are not living up to that code, then you can inform the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. Direct any complaints in writing to the Broadcasting Complaints Commission of South Africa. PO Box 142365, Craig Hall 2024. Fax to 011-326-3198 or an email to bccsa@nabsa.co.za. For more information, please visit www.bccsa.co.za. The Talking Point with Kathy Motlatlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
I can vividly remember my mother taking me with her to the voting station, which was near the clinic where she worked, and where she would cast her vote for the very first time in a general election at the age of 45 years old. That's 2 years older than I am today, standing in front of you. Take a moment to think about what that day and that election must have meant for her and for the millions of Black South Africans who were voting for the very first time. People who were previously not even considered legitimate citizens in the country of their birth. It took 5 long years of negotiations for the multiracial, multi-party convention for a democratic South Africa, and later for the first democratic parliament to negotiate, draft, and pass one of the world's most respected and celebrated constitutions. For years, that negotiation process was marred by sabotage, assassinations, boycotts, and bloodshed. And yet, despite these many challenges, it also delivered a functioning electoral process and a visionary blueprint for a transformed society in South Africa. This blueprint contained not just a Bill of Rights, but a Bill of Public Goods, a promissory note, and a commitment to deliver a demonstrably better life for all of South Africa's people.
And that there is